Hey everyone, and welcome back to our DC Films podcast, episode 29. I know it's been a while since our last episode. It was back it's like a month and a half ago now. But a lot has happened in that time. And for those of you who don't follow us on social media, on our Twitter page or our own personal Twitters, a few weeks after our last episode, I got married. On May 12th. Thank you, everyone. So that took up some time, and then the week after it was, of course, my honeymoon. So that took up time as well, and since then we've been trying. Ever since I came back from my honeymoon, we've been trying to schedule something, but it's just hard between all of our own life schedules and everything going on. Mm-hmm. But so we're finally here on Wednesday, June 13th, which for me is the 5-year anniversary of myself seeing Man of Steel for the very first time. And this episode, the main topic is going to be the 5-year anniversary and how Man of Steel has affected us each individually. But today, surprisingly, so Patty Jenkins posted this Twitter, because the Wonder Woman sequel is now in production, Wonder Woman 1984, and she posted this picture of Chris Pine in the movie. And the gal posted a picture of herself as well from the movie, looking at a bunch of different TV monitors that have various 80s things on them. So
that was a cool picture.
Yeah, so we'll definitely talk about those. And I know there's been a lot of shake-ups in DC lately with Jeff Johns and all this other stuff going on. We'll definitely talk about those. But enough from me. So joining me today are the other podcast members. So if each of you guys want to go around and reintroduce yourselves to the listeners.
Hey everyone, I'm Artyom and I'm Greg Kungwal from Tumblr.
Hello, I am Katie and I'm Story Advocate on Tumblr.
I'm Al Speed. I go by Speed of the Oppressed on Tumblr.
I'm Danielle. I am a Social Justice League on Tumblr.
And I'm Rebecca, and I am Endeavor Network on Tumblr.
And I'm Amber, and I'm at By Witch of the West on Tumblr.
Okay, so I think it's probably best, especially since the news came out today, to talk about Wonder Woman 1984. Get that out of the way. So I wake up this morning to see everyone's Twitter blowing up. I'm like, oh my god, what happened? And all of a sudden, there's Chris Pine there on my dash. And I just...
I heard that.
Okay, I just want to say this. I loved Chris Pine in Wonder Woman. His performance as Steve Trevor really, really blew me away. Not that I ever doubted his performance or his acting ability, but just what he was able to do really just surprised me in making me so emotionally attached to a character who I thought was going to be a good character, but just who was a lot more human and had a lot more qualities to relate to than I would have initially thought. Now, going into this, after, spoiler alert for Wonder Woman if you haven't seen it, but, after his sacrifice at the end of Wonder Woman, I just felt like his journey and his storyline was complete. He did what they set to do for his story, and that was it. And they killed him off, and I feel like it was a pretty definitive death. The plane blew up. It wasn't like Captain America flying into ice and he's just frozen. Mm-hmm. The plane blew up. So unless time travel is an aspect of this or whatever, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about him being back for the sequel. And some people have been extreme about it either way, going, why is everyone complaining? You don't know the storyline, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's just going, this is fucking awful, this sucks, this is why there aren't any stakes in superhero movies anymore, and blah, blah, blah. I'm more in the middle where it's okay, I'll admit, I don't know the storyline for the sequel. I don't. But at the same time, I feel like him coming back, it does tarnish Wonder Woman's ending a bit for me, because it's well, what does his sacrifice mean if he just comes back anyway? Mm-hmm. So those are just my thoughts. So if you guys want to go ahead and go off, go right ahead.
Amber, go nuts. Wait, Artyom's going. Okay.
I have to say that it's hard to resist to see Chris Pine to reprise his role as Steve Trevor, because, as you said, he was amazing. And I kind of feel it's unfair to him to not to refuse his resurrection, because we are all okay with Superman resurrecting in the next movie. And I mean, why we allow it for Clark, but we refuse that for Steve, even though you can say that Clark's arc was kind of completed in Batman v Superman as well, sort of. And I am in the middle of this situation as well. I'm not totally against, and I kind of feel like it is unnecessary as well, but we will see. I'm not going to judge it completely before the movie, at least.
You make a fair point, Artyom, and I too am always of the wait and see ilk. But I will say the one difference between Clark dying and resurrecting and me being okay with that versus being a little bit more nervous about Steve is the fact that Clark has always been made to be an archetype for Jesus. You know, that symbolism has always been there, so you kind of expect that. Steve, you know, not so much. He's awesome. I love him. But I have great heartburn with, you know, other TV series and movies and, you know, all sorts of other stuff outside of this, bringing people back because they just can't bear to let them go. And so you have to be so careful because it can really sabotage the beauty of their original sacrifice, of their original death. You know, it can really undermine some of the wonderful quality that came with them that first time around. And I'm always of the wait and see mind, and I will wait and see. But I admit to being nervous because it reminds me too much of like certain TV shows recently and all through my life that are like, well, we love this actor and we just can't bear to get rid of them, so we'll just go ahead and create a way for them to stay. But over time, it does more damage than it ever does good. And so I'm just nervous. But I also was very nervous when Zach said he was going to adapt, you know, Frank Miller's Dark Knight Rises. So, you know, I could be pleasantly surprised. Yeah, that's the one. Sorry. You know, I could be pleasantly surprised. I can happily walk in there without going, this is going to suck, and just wait and see what they have to give me. But I admit I'm nervous.
I think there's room for nuance in this conversation. I just think that my main sticking point is female love interests don't resurrect. This is a thing. Like, female love interests don't generally resurrect. We almost never see it. It's not a thing that we allow to happen in this genre. And the idea that Steve is any better than any of the female love interests who have been fridged for decades and decades is very, very, very hard for me. It's very difficult. I think if you look in the background of the picture, it kind of looks like they might have brought back Etta too. Yeah, and I think this actually
Where's the picture? I gotta find it.
Oh my gosh! I didn't even look at it very close, honestly. But then one of the people that I follow on Twitter was like, "Who's that redhead behind him?" And I was like, "Wait."
Okay, now that would be kind of cool. Not
that changes
both
things.
Them coming
that changes
back, but
things
maybe,
for me.
Maybe that means that, yeah, you know, or maybe, oh, good Lord, is that her? Sorry, I just found it. But maybe she's also just kind of seeing things. Oh,
I kind of don't
want her. It's kind of blurry, but it could be her.
I don't really want either of them.
I don't want it back.
It's gotta be literally them. It has to be literally them because, like, why would they be dressed in the worst '80s fashion of all? Like,
wearing a fanny pack.
Picture them.
The only thing I would say is, you know, part of me thinks that if there's two of them, that it honestly improves the possibility that Diana's just kind of seeing them in other people, so to speak. That sounds weird, but you know what I mean? You know, but again, I will say I agree with you, Danielle, and also it kind of bugs me that like Steve is wonderful and his magnitude on her journey should not be undermined, but at the same time, this is just like Justice League. To me, we've got to be so careful because they're making everything about her pertain to Steve, and like there is more to her than that. There is more to any of us than that. She's lived 50 years. No, I take it back. I can't do math. Yeah, 60 years. You know, after he's gone, you know, when would she actually finally move on? You know, when would she actually decide that something else in her life needs to be good and it cannot always be about this dead person that's left behind? You know, like that does a disservice
If
to the
anything-
character, and I would argue that for any character, that it does
Yeah,
them a
but-
disservice to make them nothing but about this one love that they lost. You know, that creeps me out because it makes them so one-dimensional. I hate that. I really do.
Yeah.
And I don't really
if
appreciate them doing
anything-
it to her. You know. So sorry. Go ahead.
If anything, maybe they should have, I don't know, given us a hint of Antiope coming back. I mean, the loss of
Take her.
Themyscira for Diana must have been devastating after what she lived on the First World War. So maybe trying to go back to Themyscira would have been something, I don't know, maybe she sees Antiope in the modern world because she misses her home, she misses her, something like that. I don't know. And just, I don't know how to feel about this Steve thing, because while I liked him very much on the movie, I think this is the first time I have liked Steve Trevor on anything.
Okay.
So I don't know.
You know,
He-
it's one of these we just
he
gotta
did-
wait it out. You know.
Yeah, he did
There-
what he had to do on the movie to show Diana humanity and all of this, but I don't know. It's just, I'm annoyed.
I get you.
I
get you.
think there is something suspicious because, revealing Steve Trevor right now, it's a huge spoiler for the movie.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
not even him. Maybe it's some god disguised as Steve Trevor, and he's trying
Duke
to.
of Deception.
Oh my god, I hope Ares is wearing a fanny pack. Please.
And
I want
Or-
it so much now.
Okay, now I need to
that-
hire somebody to do that fan art. Sorry. Go ahead. Joe.
that second photo of Diana and monitors made me think about. She recently in DC Rebirth had a villain, artificial intelligence, and what if this entire thing is 980s is it's like in some simulation she was put in, and somebody, I don't know, maybe trying to break her through her mind, since maybe someone figured out that they can win against her physically, so they have to take her mentally.
See,
That
the
would be
thing
an
about
excellent
that
plot,
is,
Marcel. Can you write
That would be legit. That would be
Be
legit.
down with that.
That would
see,
be
the thing
amazing.
about, see, the thing about that is that reminds, I don't know, it seems like a weird cop-out to just put her in a virtual world of the 80s. I don't know, that's probably just me.
No, I can see that. You
It's
know.
an interesting theory.
Like,
Yeah, it's
maybe
very
if it was
interesting
Brother
theory.
Eye. Like, maybe if it was Brother Eye that did it, to introduce Brother Eye, that would be pretty interesting.
That would be. I would find that more plausible. I just can't. For me personally, it's just hard to imagine a scenario where, like, unless it's someone pretending to be Steve, and what what logistically would cause him to come back to life or to come just to be here and not obviously not in the present day because it's the 80s, but you know what I mean, like to bring him back. I just don't know.
Some people are saying it's Martian.
Like Martian Manhunter.
Oh, that would be
Yeah.
kind
I don't know. You see, like I feel like I just. Well, to be honest, I'm not sure if the DCEU is ever gonna really tackle Martian Manhunter.
They better. I'll find them.
I mean,
I'd love to see
hey,
him
I
tackle
love the
it.
character. I just don't know if it's. I just don't know what Patty is gonna do with this character, and I'm a little worried about the sequel. I just don't want it to, again, just. I don't want it to just basically like be like, oh hey, you remember how you got really emotional about the last one? Oh, it's okay. He just comes back and it all ends up working out anyway.
Yeah, that
That's
feels
just
like
my
a
main
cop out.
worry.
My thing
I
is
mean-
like I don't even if it's him and Etta, like I feel like Diana is really old, and if you want to stress that, you have to give her different relationships throughout her life.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. This
Like
is my
don't
big
just have
thing.
her with the same people, the same group of people her entire journey, because it's
I
like
love those
she's
guys.
really old. You have to stress that like she
Yeah.
goes through different journeys with different people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love
mean-
those guys, but I agree. You know, you can't just
Yeah.
bring it down to that. Sorry, Al, go.
We all
Oh, you go.
we all
I'll give it.
we all were expecting. I mean, we all knew that Superman will be resurrected in Justice League, and yet Warner Brothers kept that a secret, like
Yeah.
a huge secret. And they're revealing Chris Pine like it's okay. So I'm just not sold that this is real Steve Trevor. Like, not,
I hear
no.
you. I hear you. It really is something we're just gonna have to go and see. Sequels make me nervous anyway because over my very long life, yes, I'm old. Sequels can be so awesome or they can just be awful, and that happens a lot. But I don't think just because it's a sequel, it's going to be bad. So I trust Patty that far. I'm just not sure. I don't know. I just have lots and lots of thoughts. So we're just gonna have to wait and see. It's gonna suck waiting.
So I think I got my theory on this. I think it's not. Oh, who's that? Oh, wait. Anyway, I think my theory for this is that I think it's a ghost of Diana's past that's continuously haunting her ever since Steve Trevor died. And with each new century she goes into, she imagines Steve Trevor, if he was alive, what he'd wear, what he would say. And it's like this spiritual entity that keeps following her in her mind that just won't seem to go away, and it constantly reminds her of, her one failure that she had.
Mm-hmm. That seems possible.
That would be a really cool possibility, especially if the entire arc of the film was the idea that she has to find a way to come to peace with this so that, he's not always constantly literally haunting her. You know what I mean? So she has to be able to find peace and kind of let go. That would be cool. I would be on board for that.
So we're just pretending Justice League didn't happen, because that's fine with me.
That's fine with me after I saw the movie.
Basically, it doesn't exist for me until I get a ZS version. So.
Justice who?
Justice what?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm totally okay. Well, especially with it being in the past, like they don't have to acknowledge it anyway. So that's one thing I can say is that like they don't have to acknowledge that monstrosity of a movie. But one thing I gotta say
now that you brought up technology, it could be Brother Eye putting something in Diana to make her.
I'm still waiting for Justice League to come out.
Yeah, it's so long. Like, jeez.
All right.
We've been waiting 2016?
Pushing it back. What is this, Kingdom Hearts? I don't understand.
Oh.
We're going to be so disappointed. We're going to be so disappointed if any of this doesn't happen in the movie.
That's the thing, is that this is what speculation does, and it always makes me nervous. I'm like, oh, man, we just thought of like 3 really good scenarios for this movie. What if none of them happen?
Yeah.
That would be sad.
That's why you gotta write the fanfiction before the movie comes out.
Yep, that's key.
We could talk about the fashion, though. Does anybody want to talk about the fashion?
Because, oh my
god!
Can I just say something real quick? This is why I didn't want. I was trepidated when I heard this movie was set in the 80s, because I'm like, oh no, they're gonna do archetypes. They're gonna do stereotypes about the 80s. They're gonna be like, ooh, it's the 80s, kids. Like, I don't want that.
Yeah,
gonna do the
80s. Somebody wandering around with like.
Okay, but
Diana looks amazing.
Diana doesn't have a perm.
She looks great.
She's not wearing track pants.
No, but she's wearing the trousers and the high heels, which is
beautiful.
Legit. And the coat with the rolled up sleeves. Yeah, that's.
I don't think there's enough shoulder pad for me. Personally, I would like them to turn up the. If Patty, if you're listening, one request: please put more shoulder pad. More. But yeah, like I think like a lot of Steve's choices, and it looks like Etta's choices, if that's Etta, are very jokey and very like stereotypical, and hopefully it'll be played for effect instead of like
that's an actual fashion.
If it was
treated
like
as legit fashion.
Going, if Etta was here, she would totally love that outfit.
I wore a windsuit
Etta dresses
in the 80s.
Like and that would just be
it
so.
It was a tiny windsuit,
Diana's
but they exist. I wore a windsuit with a fanny pack once. I was very small, but I'm saying it's real. It is real. It's just a mistake.
Yeah, but I only have one issue with it being in the 80s, and that's the problem with most 80s movies, they do this thing, like most 80s movies that are remade for now, or I don't know how to say it, but basically movies that take place in the 80s, they like to really do this thing where they really like to play up the fact of, oh, it's the 80s, look how much cooler it was here than it was now. And I don't know, maybe my issue is that I feel like the movie's going to try and make the 80s as if it's this paradigm of like good times and stuff.
That happens a lot when people do other time periods, and you're right. And that's like, I'm sorry if they do that. I will be an awful audience member as I hysterically laugh myself stupid in the back row, because it's like, it just like every other time had its problems, had its issues, and was not ideal. Any time period, you're right, you can look at and they'll be like, look how wonderful and ideal it was, but they don't show you the seamy underside that is always there. And so, yeah, like, I hope that they don't do that, because it won't sell for me, and I will laugh myself silly and then kind of get thrown out. So, I just hope they don't go that way. But that happens a lot. When I was growing up, and I'm dating myself, the 60s were in. And it was like, that was 20 years back, and then let's idealize the 60s, The 60s? Really? Like, as I got older and started actually studying history, it was like, you guys, this was not an ideal time at all. Like, there was a lot going on. It was not something where you just kind of sat down and went, wow, what a wonderful decade, And so, like, and it just keeps rolling on. The farther we go, the more we turn back 20, 30 years and go, oh, wasn't that a simpler time? It wasn't. We just are looking back at it with rose-colored glasses. So, yeah.
I actually have a very low opinion of the 80s just based on some 80s movies that I've seen. Like, I mean,
I have a low
movies
opinion
from
of
the
80s
time.
fashion styles. Because even when I was in the 80s as a child, it was like, dang, that's just the ugliest thing I've ever seen. So, but yeah, I hear you.
I mean, no offense to anybody who grew up then, but just like from my perspective, just like, I don't know.
It was a different time, and I can tell you, it wasn't any better. It was just different.
Yeah. I just like my thing is like that's one, honestly, because I grew up like in the 90s, so like for me, like, and I had parents who their era was the 80s, so like I grew up with like a lot of like 80s like movies and TV shows. So for me, like, even though I didn't live in that era, that like anything I feel like especially with Stranger, one of the reasons I loved the first season of Stranger Things is because I felt so much nostalgia. I felt like, oh my god, this is like the Goonies meets E.T., like everything I loved from when I was a kid, and it's like that whole vibe, like whatever it is about the 80s for me, like it just something, even though I wasn't physically there, like something about that era just connects with me. So like
I see that.
Like for me, like I'm excited to see how they handle it. I'm just curious how. I'm just curious to see how the story plays out, because especially like, because it really seems like Patty's like completely ignoring Diana's line of BVS about walking away from mankind for 100 years.
Yeah, kind of hoping she
I think we'll have to see how
it has seemed like that for a long time,
Yeah.
Because even at the end of Wonder Woman, like, it doesn't even seem like she fully walks away. It just seems like, oh, she's kind of always been there. And it's like, no, you weren't. Like,
yeah, and there was a skip, and it was like, okay, maybe she's just been in the background, like you talk about, not actually making yourself known, but still helping out, stuff like that. But it's just, it doesn't appear like they've gone that direction, which is
I'm
too
thinking
bad.
that like maybe what's gonna happen is like this is gonna be like a covert kind of mission for her in this movie, because with Wonder Woman she's out in the open. Villagers are seeing her. With Justice League, it's the same way, But like with Batman v Superman, it's the same way, She doesn't want to be in public fighting fire everywhere, Like I'm thinking maybe in this movie she's just gonna be like on a covert thing, something like that the public doesn't know about. But
I mean, that very much could be the case, and like especially with Cheetah being the villain, like if they're into some sort of like archaeology or something like along those lines, to where like it takes her away from like America for a while, then that's something you'd perfectly be okay with, like a jungle, like Indiana Jones kind of vibe, but just
I'm laughing at him and Diana going, that should be in a museum, but
about something. So wait, which Cheetah is this? Is this the Cheetah who's a scientist and mutated into?
This is the Barbara
Cheetah,
Minerva version. So this is the one who was
archaeologist.
cursed, I believe.
There's more? There's more than one? I did not know.
Yeah, there's one person who's a scientist, and then there's another where she's like from Themyscira.
People have been saying that it sounds like Rucka's Cheetah, which is the best case scenario.
That would be really cool. That
would be Rucka's always the best case scenario.
And also, I gotta say, I would really like it settled one way or the other in this film, just for my personal peace of mind, whether or not she can go back to Themyscira. Because they didn't really make it clear. She just said, like in the trailer for Wonder Woman, it was like you may not be able to come back or something like that. And then in the film, it was you may not come back. Then Justice League, they send a warning, but it doesn't really say whether or not she can actually visit. I would like to know whether she's able to go back to Themyscira and see people, or if she's legit out of it forever. I just, for my own peace of mind, being able to picture this character, I kind of need an answer to that.
I think she can go back to Themyscira, because I remember back in the Wonder Woman movie when the God Killer sword broke.
Yes,
didn't
thank
she
you.
get a new one? So,
yeah, it was like she'd have to go somewhere, right? Or maybe she made her own, but I'd much rather see her go back home and go, yeah, so my God Killer broke, and then turned out I was a God Killer. Do you have another sword?
Maybe she gets a new one. Maybe she gets a new one on this film.
Maybe.
Yeah,
most likely.
I mean, so my thing is like, because if she,
so many possibilities.
I mean, if Steve Trevor and German soldiers made it to Themyscira, why Diana can't?
This is true.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
then why can't
thinking.
she? That was exactly going to be my point. So like, unless like there's a rule saying once you leave Themyscira, you can't come back. Unless that is like a specifically established, which it hasn't been. They just said you may never return. And does that mean there's a chance you might not be able to return, or you can't come back?
Exactly.
Or maybe
they're
there's room
not
for
being specific.
Is it like a physical force field that prevents you from coming back?
Or maybe Themyscira moves.
I think, guys, I think what her mother meant is that once Diana sees how much the world needs a hero, she won't come back to Themyscira because she would want to save the world. So maybe something like that.
Maybe. But that line is just so open to interpretation. So like they can really go any way they want. I just want a little more certainty as to whether or not like we'll see Themyscira again, because like I want to see more of Hippolyta. That's what like Themyscira. That was some of my favorite parts of Justice League. That whole action sequence and seeing them all again, like that.
The only part I liked on that movie.
Well, so like, seeing them and then seeing like the flashback with like the battle between them and Steppenwolf. I loved seeing the Amazon so much, and I don't know. I know Wonder Woman is more than just being from Themyscira, but at the same time, I love being there so much that I just hope we get some glimpse of them in this film, or like a moment of her somehow being able to contact her mother or speak with her to some degree. I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do. I just hope there's some sort of reference, or we can at least see Themyscira again. That's just me.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. So obviously, another thing that's happened since then, or since our last episode anyway, because we never officially announced this. I mean, you guys might have seen it on social media. We haven't talked about this today, like as a group. So I'm kind of surprising everyone with this. But I just want to give Katie a shout out for being one of the winners of the BVS reference event.
Yeah.
That was so long ago, I forgot all that.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for my present, Zach.
Okay, I was just gonna ask. Well, I guess because Fiona posted something recently, like like Zach's finally like getting everything together. He's about to send them out soon. So.
Oh really? I didn't see that.
Something along those lines. Something
So cool.
Yeah.
If
So
you get the
seriously,
Snyder
congrats,
Cut share.
Katie. I'm so happy for you. Whatever it is, you need to show us.
I will.
Yeah.
I definitely will. But if it's Snyder Cut, I'm just gonna like shotgun that
Oh my
thing
god!
over
If it
there.
is, we're flying over to your house to watch it. Just FYI.
Okay. That sounds great. I got a theater in the basement. Let's go. So
It's gonna cost me like thousands of dollars, but I'm gonna come.
we'll do a GoFundMe.
I don't have a visa, so I can go.
Yeah, we'll create a GoFundMe. We'll fund everyone's trip over.
There you go. See.
No, but seriously, Katie, congrats. We're also happy for you, and we're all a little jealous. But hey, like you're recognized for your work there, and I just want to say we're all super super happy for you.
Yeah.
Yep. Congrats.
Still can't believe.
But no, but seriously, like that whole like I know there was like a little bit of drama in the fandom like last week or the week before, whatever. Considering just like basically it's kind of like the fans with Fiona and fans like not as with Fiona, and it was still a lot of drama. But I do want to give her credit for creating the event to let people like Katie be recognized for being able to analyze these films and to show that these films mean so much more to us than just being just superhero movies. Like, like Fiona didn't have to go out of her way to do that. Like, she worked with Zach on this, and I do want to give her credit for that. So, Fiona, if you are listening to this, thank you for that. Thank you for giving us all the opportunity to do that, because Zach, I posted my own, and Zach liked it. So I mean,
that's the thing too, is that like with Fiona, the situation is that she could just keep this, this communication that she has with Zach really private and enjoy it on her own. And we're really lucky that she actually decides that she wants to be part of the fandom, and she wants to be involved in that, and she wants to keep us posted on what's happening. And I think that, anybody who's coming at her for that is coming at her for totally different reasons than, and mostly because of jealousy, and we can all be really transparent about that. Like, it was bound to happen, that people were going to be mad that she's the one that he's communicating with, and it's like, it was going to be someone who cares.
I know. I was going to say, he's communicating. Do you know how many people out there have legions of fans but aren't communicating with anyone?
And thank God he has one person to communicate with, honestly. Because the fandom is variable. We all understand that. The fandom is, there's a great part of the DCEU fandom, and there is a not so great part of the DCEU fandom. And those people are very overwhelming, and they've been really disrespectful of his space and his time. And him having a filter is a godsend, because we can't control what those people do. I have cussed them out on Twitter hundreds of times, and I just stopped, because there's no point in it. It doesn't change.
They don't understand. Give everybody else a bad name. Although I will say, I find it hilarious that whole thing started because basically, because the fandom doesn't have enough to argue about, they felt the need to divide into pro Jeff Johns and anti Jeff Johns factions, and that just, I was like, wow, come on, guys, we shouldn't eat each other, I
can understand,
we just. When there's this much passion rolling around, I guess it's bound to happen, but it's just like, everybody take a giant chill pill. It's okay. It's okay.
And that's what my whole thing is.
In the wake of this disaster, everybody's looking for someone to blame.
I can see that. And I know who I blame, and I admit, John isn't really that high on my list of favorite people. I don't particularly like him, but in the end, it's just like, okay. I don't know. I'm
a mess. I blame everyone until further notice.
Honestly, for me, how I feel about the whole situation, I'll say this too. Fiona should get so much credit for everything she's been doing for the fandom, but also at the same time, I think worshiping Fiona or just anyone in general in the fandom above anyone else, that's toxic.
I've never heard of anyone.
I just think that it's ass kissing. I just think that those people think that they can get closer to Zach through her, and that's creepy and weird. And also, why is it so important to you to get close to Zach? It's creepy. Don't do it. Stop.
The guy has space, and
you're really lucky that you get to watch his films.
Yep, and unfortunately, we as humans seem to be doing this so much when you find somebody and put them on a pedestal. And I've seen it happen in fandoms before, where they find what's it called? A big name fan. There we go, a BNF. And and then they kind of get a following or a reputation, and then people put them on the pedestal too, and it's kind of a recipe for disaster. And I'm pretty sure Fiona would be like, please don't put me up here, because that's not actually what she's all about. So
didn't Zach make a whole movie about not putting someone on a pedestal? Did he not make it? Have a whole following, or is that just me?
We as humans need to stop, because we have such unreal expectations for people when we do that to them, and they will always fail us because they're human. They're going to, because they are not perfect. None of us are, and you're setting yourself up for disappointment and being bigger.
Yeah, and again, I just want to say, thank you to Fiona, but also, for the people, and not just people who do this to Fiona, but who do this to Zach and constantly bug him about the Snyder Cut. Just stop. Stop. You're making yourselves in the fandom look bad, first of all.
If you really cared about him, you would leave him alone.
Exactly.
About stuff like that.
It's one thing, for our Tim and I, we have both had interactions with Zach, but they had almost nothing to do with the DCEU. Like we're talking about like for him it was like basically it was just like the gym. Like that's like something that Zach's passionate about. It has nothing to do with the DCEU, but Zach like we asked him a question and he answered. And like, hey, like it didn't take that much effort. Like it's one thing to be like genuinely curious or like ask him a question about whatever he's like currently doing or whatever, but to be like, where's the Snyder Cut? Where's the Snyder Cut? Oh, hey, haven't seen Justice League yet? Where's the Snyder Cut? Where's the Snyder Cut? Stop!
Gosh, yeah.
Stop it!
Please.
And that's
Yeah, that
why
can get
like
annoying.
I'm so like I do want a Snyder Cut. I do more than anything. But
We all
it's
do.
just like
Come on,
I almost don't want to be a part of the movement because people just keep harassing Zach, and it's just like. And seeing some of the behavior, some of the people on Twitter and Tumblr, well, it's Twitter mostly. Honestly, I'm barely on Tumblr anymore.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah,
But-
it's kind of on there.
But honestly, I'm getting really annoyed, and I'm not pointing out anyone in particular, but I'm just saying like certain aspects of the fandom have been really frustrating me lately. And it's making it hard for me to want to be excited for like the possibility of a Snyder Cut when all they do is just harass Zack and everything has to be compared to Zack's like Shazam has to be a Zack Snyder movie, Wonder Woman has to be a Zack Snyder movie, and it's like no, like Zack made great films. Those were they were great, awesome. He don't basically just
Zach
stop.
also believed in lifting other people up, though. So this is the problem. Is that, Zach said Patty would do an excellent job at this. Go, Patty. Ayer would do an excellent job at this. Go, dude. And he provides a lot of support, a lot of encouragement, and really believes in lifting other artists up. So trying to condense everybody else into Zach style is just as wrong as the entire world expecting Zach to be like Marvel. That's not the way it is. Everybody's kind of a different artist and they're doing their own thing. You can like them or not, but please stop expecting everything to be one tone. I love Zach's stuff more than anything else, but Patty's films are Patty's films, and she's got a different feel. And there's nothing wrong with that. I still love Suicide Squad, guys. And he had a totally different feel, but you know what? It worked for me, and that's okay. Zach today was like, ooh, so excited for shooting,
I know, that was
1984.
awesome. And
He's
just,
throwing support out there. The least we can do is roll with that and be like, yeah, this is cool. And when he puts up a picture of doing barbecue with the family, please don't barge in with where's the Snyder Cut.
Oh, God,
He's
I know.
sharing you a
For
piece
real.
of his family life, and you want to just go in and demand what you want. Stop that. Stop it now. So, okay.
also, I feel
Honestly,
like,
if you don't like anything in the DCEU besides Snyder, like, you might not be a DCEU fan,
You're a Snyder fan, and there's nothing wrong with being a Snyder fan. I'm totally one. But, everybody else's films are their films, and you just cannot expect them all to perfectly emulate him. It's not going to work like that.
Well, as someone who is probably primarily a Snyder fan, I think that it's a situation where it's really weird that you have to love everything in the DCEU. It's really weird that you think that that's a qualification and that you think that anything that you don't love in the DCEU is trash and should be removed from the DCEU. No, you're gonna like some stuff and you're gonna not like some stuff. And I know that this comes from the MCU perspective of sort of like they've decided that it's all or nothing and you have to watch every film because every film is interlocking. But that's just not the case with this franchise, and I think that that's for the better. I think that allows us for so much more variety and so much more artistic expression that I'd rather have a whole bunch of different viewpoints, even from directors I don't necessarily like, than have a bunch of movies that are exactly the same that I love, quite honestly. And I think the reason for that is that it's just better for the art form. It's better for the medium. It's better for the genre.
Yeah.
I want them to show that we can do a lot of different things within the realm of this genre so that we don't get strangled down into the Marvel method and then we end up with just Marvel movies for the rest of time until everybody gets superhero fatigue for real. Because I do think superhero fatigue could happen. I just think that the idea of it happening, it's not inevitable, you guys. It's not inevitable at all. It is something that could happen because the genre stagnates, and stagnation is being reflected in a lot of the films that I've been seeing come out in the genre lately, and it's been reflected in a lot of the decisions being made by higher ups. And I think that the more diverse in every way that the DCEU can be, the better for the health of the genre. And that's like, I don't know, that's what I care about. I don't know why necessarily that's my priority, but it is my priority. I'd rather have a really healthy superhero film genre than a bunch of films that really fit my taste. Like, I would love for Zack Snyder to make like 17 of these movies, personally. I would probably stroke out from joy. But I will admit, it would not be very good for the genre.
Yeah. Amber just said in the chat that she won't be able to comment anymore, but she'll keep listening. And she said, also, I didn't get to say that Patty is good at making things come full circle in terms of the way she tells stories. Monster is a perfect example of that. So I guess we'll have to wait and see with Wonder Woman 84.
Oh, thank you. I didn't see that. I was too busy fighting my computer. She does have an excellent point. And I have not seen Monster, but I think I'm going to put that on my list because that's a legit point. So...
Yeah. I think with my issue with Zach and the whole DCEU thing, I think for the most part is that my issue is that I feel as though Zach did these movies and put his heart into them, and it feels like everyone's just going to throw them to the side or retcon all the things that happened in it just so they could recreate the DCEU. And I feel like that's a very unprofessional way to go, because Zach's movie started in a dark place. You gotta feel the darkness before you can feel the light. You gotta taste the bitter before you taste the sweet. And I feel like by erasing Man of Steel and BVS, you're essentially erasing what the DCEU was grounded on, where it started. Because it makes you appreciate the light when you know what the darkness is. It makes you appreciate a Superman who is positive and outgoing and able to save the day when you see where he came from before.
To me, the reason that I love Clark is because of what he's gone through. So if you take away what he's gone through, then I'm not gonna love him anymore.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
It's weird to see that so many people, they love comic book movies because they based on their favorite comic books and their favorite characters. And yet they refuse to let a cinematic universe work in the same fashion as comic books do, because even though all these Superman action comics, Batman, Harley Quinn, Deathstroke, and all these series of comic books, they exist in one universe, but each of them is absolutely different in style and in tone and in storytelling, because different people tell different stories. And so Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Justice League, it was supposed to be his story that he was writing in this cinematic universe. And Wonder Woman solo movies are like stories written by Patty Jenkins, etc. And this is why variety should be acceptable. People should allow cinematic universe to work in the same way as comic books do. Otherwise, we will get Thor Ragnarok or something like that.
Good point, RTO.
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, seriously, variety is a spice of life. It's just like last year alone, every single MCU film I did not like at all. Whether it was Spider-Man: Homecoming, Thor, especially fucking Thor.
When are we going to talk about that?
Okay, so we're gonna save some of the MCU discussion for the Bitter Geeks podcast that we're doing soon. And again, as a little bit of an update, so we're still planning to do that soon. Probably the next couple weeks. We finally got our logo done. Amber's sister was nice enough to create our logo for us.
Amber's sister rocks!
She's fantastic. She's great.
Seriously, we can't thank her enough for doing that for us. So we will be doing it soon. We'll announce an official launch date on our Twitters. So again, follow us at DC Films Podcast on Twitter. That's where you guys will get all of our information regarding future episodes or what's going on with the Bitter Geeks podcast. But yeah, so I don't want to get too much into my hate for Thor. But yeah, we'll talk about that a little later.
Not Thor as a character, though, right?
No, just Thor as the movie.
No. Just that specific film. The most recent Thor film. 'cause I love Thor as a character, and that's why it's a little off topic. That's why I am so tired of everyone saying like, "Oh, now I can finally like Thor. He's not boring anymore." It's like, "Argh!" Like
He's never boring.
This is the thing, is that in order to talk about Ragnarok, I feel like we have to talk about the earlier Thor films, and that's my problem.
We do. Yes,
it has
we do.
to be a
and
whole
I'm front center
episode.
for those. So.
Like,
Because when we're talking about Ragnarok, we're not talking about hating the movie. We're talking about hating that the movie just basically stole the franchise from the existing films. Like, that's what we're kind of talking about. And I think that that's a completely different thing from saying, like, this is a bad movie, because I still refuse to say that Ragnarok is a bad movie.
Yeah,
it's not a bad movie. In the genre that it's trying to be, and for the things that it's trying to accomplish, it's very successful. It is, you know, if you want to, like, check off the boxes, it's kind of a textbook good movie. But as a Thor movie, we can talk about the ways in which it doesn't necessarily measure up. And but I do think that Ragnarok should probably be our first Bitter Geeks podcast episode. It's just my logistical problem is fitting the people in, because I know that almost everyone in the entire chat wants to talk about this film.
Yeah.
We need to have like a wrestling match style where we like duke it out and debate, and then
We can have two.
the other one
Maybe we
like
can have...
moves on, and then and we just keep doing
It
that.
could
So
be a
it's
two-part
like
episode.
It'll be
episode
debating.
thing.
Can we have two like episodes with two different sets of people?
yeah,
I think
yeah, sure.
I think there's enough conversation for that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to
That'd
talk
be cool.
about. So this sounds very much though like the not Rogue One, like the Last Jedi discussion too, where you know a series that's going along one way suddenly takes a left turn, and it's like whoa, but it doesn't line up with what came before, and so I have heartburn with that as well.
So yeah, we'll get into that earlier. But my whole point before we got a little off topic was just like, I'm tired. I agree with everything that Danielle and everyone's been saying. Is I'm tired of the same cookie cutter comic book film, which is why I loved films like Black Panther. Like, and I was so late to the game on that. Oh my god, that movie was amazing.
So late, bro.
And I have to admit, because we did our podcast right before it came out. Infinity War was one of my favorite MCU films.
Yeah.
I think it was pretty strong.
Like it still has some MCU issues. Like I was expecting those, but in terms of just my experience with the film, it was to me it was one of the best Guardians of the Galaxy films for sure.
Wait, Guardians 2?
No, I'm talking about Infinity War.
About Infinity War, but is this
Oh.
like Cap 3 is actually Avengers 2.5? You know,
Yes,
like
I don't even classify
Avengers.
Civil War as a Cap movie because it's not. And I'll argue with that on the podcast if I have to.
Okay.
So anyways, I'm saying like when the films are actually different and there are stakes in the films and they aren't just trying to make you laugh every 2 seconds. Like,
Cinematography is nice too.
yeah, it's like also like last year with like Logan. And it's just there's so much out there. In terms of
so much
stories.
untapped potential.
And
Yeah.
it's just I know I'm just tired of just every comic book movie being turned into a comedy because everyone expects those from comic book movies now, and it's so annoying when like
It becomes synonymous with action comedy.
after the Dark Knight. I remember a lot of hate. Like the Dark Knight Rises got for not being like as much as the Dark Knight, and more was the Dark Knight Rises was more of its own thing. So all of a sudden, ever since the MCU really took off, everything had to be funny, and I hate that has become the measuring stick for how good a comic book film is.
Agreed.
I just feel like I need to remind everybody, because I don't know why everybody keeps forgetting about X-Men, but X-Men has been killing the game, and they have been doing very good, balanced work. And I just feel like I need to just remind everybody of that because X-Men is awesome.
We don't talk enough about X-Men on TV.
We should talk about X-Men on Bitter Geeks. I gotta say, I have not seen an X-Men film since the very first one years ago.
Bro, you need to watch all of them
I know, and I'm
right
so
now.
sorry. And it wasn't because I was like, wow, this sucks, I'm never watching anything else. It's just that life got busy, and I admit there's like a huge path of my life where I wasn't seeing any films, and so they just naturally totally fell by the wayside. Although I do admit to being somewhat disappointed in the first one because it wasn't like the cartoon I remember watching. But see, again, expectations, and I have to get over that. So I need to line all these up and just watch them straight through and catch up because I admit to being very interested. So
Please tell me you at least saw Logan.
No, and I have been wanting to ever since I saw the trailer. I'm sorry, life is busy, okay?
This is really important to me now.
How can you be informed? I'm just saying.
Catch up because I'm like, I can't have an opinion until I actually go see it. But
It's
I
very
will tell
important.
I watched that trailer, especially the one set to Hurt, 50,000 times and was like, I'm seeing this when it comes out. And then it came out and I'm like, what in the frick? I don't have any ability to go. Crap. So yeah, I felt it a lot.
It's in the
don't skip
canon.
any of them.
It's like
People will
the
talk
most
about
important piece of superhero film outside of a Snyder film in the last 10 years.
Even just the trailer, I'm like, oh my gosh, oh I need to see this. Oh my gosh, So yeah, I know. I'm getting to it. I promise, guys. I'm sorry.
And when you're watching the X-Men movies, don't skip any of them. Sometimes people will tell you to skip things in a series, but I seriously encourage you not to skip any.
I never skip because I agree it makes better sense. Even when people do that, we'll just skip this. No. I need to see all of it, or I can't make a viable, judgment.
You should tell us what it's like watching them all in one sitting for the first time, because that's crazy.
My kids will be like, please, no more movies. Sit down.
I don't have access to that experience. I'm really excited about that.
I'm totally going to get to it. But I will just put in my plug, though. Coming back to, I agree with you, Nick. I hate that comic book film has become synonymous with action comedy in people's minds. But I also will say, if we, as fans of Zack Snyder, expect every DC film to be exactly like Zack Snyder's, we are treading the same line.
Yeah.
And we just can't afford to do that because we have spent 5 years arguing that there should be variety and there should be more than one take on a comic book film. So now, even though we love him, and I agree, Danielle, I want 17 films of his, that'd be great. Even though I want as many films from him as I could get, I don't want everybody else to be just like him because that's not their true artistic work. They need to be allowed that ability to do things differently and to do things the way they think it should go. If I agree with it, cool. If I don't, cool. Somebody else will love it, and we have to allow that kind of freedom if we're going to actually put our money where our mouth is and saying, but there should be variety in comic book films, we just can't go, well, it's out because it's not there.
I mean, what we're talking about here is that we want Zack Snyder to be Zack Snyder. We don't want Justice League to have directed by Zack Snyder and then not be that movie.
Exactly. Yep. So we have to allow others the freedom to do their take as well.
Actually, something that ticked me off in the Wonder Woman Honest trailer, which I had the mistake of watching apparently. They said, with the, they showed, how they do the featuring or the starring version of it? And they said that it was featuring Snyder Vision. I'm just like, look, Patty made the decision to use slow-mo and dark colors in that scene. That's her decision. Don't act like Zack is lording it over and we must follow the darkness that Zack Snyder has set. Patty made that decision herself.
Agreed. Totally agreed. And yeah.
Well, also, I also don't give Screen Junkies any credit because also they had a sexual harasser on their payroll for years and no one ever said anything about it, so fuck them.
Is that Devin Farisi?
No, but it's
no, some other
what's
guy.
his name?
Andy Signore. No, Andy Signore is the skinny guy, right?
Oh, okay. Either way, you're right. Oh, sorry. I'm back in.
They are so plentiful in this particular place that we have to say which one.
I know.
No, I don't know if Andy Signore did anything. Did he do anything? Did I get the wrong?
Oh yeah,
I'm
he
pretty
did.
sure I got the wrong.
For years, he was disgusting.
Oh, Andy Signore was the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry about it. We're gonna move on. But you're right. I avoid honest trailers. I avoid how it should have ended. I honestly avoid everything except for Chris Wong and everything. Cinema Wins. There we go.
I used to watch how it should have ended because honestly, their stuff on BVS wasn't that mean. It was just I thought it was kind of cute to be honest. But at a certain point, they just got kind of mean about it. You know,
Yes.
it stopped being funny. It stopped being cute. Like they actually
They just jumped on the
Yeah,
bandwagon.
went there.
They
you
got
know,
really nasty, and then when people
anti-
take the cutesy funny stuff and went, oh well, they're right. That's exactly how it should have ended. The movie was wrong, and it should have been this way. It was like, you guys, you completely missed the boat on this, and this is like, here's 80 million reasons why you're freaking wrong. So you know, like why the movie had to end this way. So shut up. But yeah,
It's not
in the
even
end,
just, like, even
it
the
started
stuff
doing
about-
way more damage than you know anything else.
It wasn't even just the stuff about how the movie should have ended, but it's just like the stuff. Did you see what they've been doing with like the Martha thing?
They
No,
won't
and I've
shut
been
up
ignoring
about it.
it.
And it's
Like,
oh
so
my
I
God.
didn't watch the last one I watched was the Wonder Woman, how it should have ended.
Oh, God, that was
where
the last
like
one I watched. I don't
Diana
know why
was
I
saying
did.
like, oh, you and Clark are so dark or something like that. I'm like, Wonder Woman was dark.
brother.
Why is everybody missing this? Like it just stopped being cute, basically.
Yep. It gets old really, really fast.
So I think with that being said, I think now is finally a good time. I know we didn't talk about the Jeff Johns or shifted Warner Brothers. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, but I feel like we should probably say that for another week because of today being the anniversary of
Me too.
something's going on back there.
Somebody's having a good time in the background.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's probably my brother.
Oh yeah, because I hear a lot of yelling and laughing.
Yeah, that's my brother.
Brother sees a target.
Yeah.
That's
So I
my
think
brother,
now's a
I'm
good
sorry.
time as any to finally talk about Man of Steel on its 5-year anniversary.
Alright,
And I
hang
know
on,
we
I'm sorry,
we
I'm sorry.
talked about it in the past. Like we've had like Kate and I had our first initial commentary. We did our commentary a few months back. But I feel like especially with it being the 5-year anniversary, and considering where the fandom is now, like and also like because we had such a strong fandom just day when it was Batman v Superman's 2-year anniversary, like it really goes to show just how impactful these films really are. Like I've said this before, I'll say it again. Like I would not be doing this without Man of Steel and without you guys. Like the Man of Steel and the fandom, like seriously, like after I first got out of Man of Steel for the first time, like I seriously felt like in the minority because like yes, like my friend who I saw it with said he enjoyed it, but I'm not sure if he lied and just said that just because he didn't want to hurt my feelings because my wife has done that to me too with certain films, BVS, but finding you guys on Tumblr and feeling like part of a community who truly loved this film and just wanted to have an outlet to speak about how much we how much we love these films, like having that really means the world to me. And here we are now 5 years later, and I consider you guys some of my closest friends. And I wish we could talk more, but I know we're all busy with life and everything. But seriously, like without this movie, I wouldn't have come to know you guys as such amazing people and amazing friends. I just want to say, thank you guys. You guys have made this really, really awesome. I know that almost sounds like an ending point of a conversation, but I just wanted to say that.
Well, I think the main point for me is that like before we were the DCEU fandom, we were the Man of Steel fandom, and I think that means something. I think that's where it came from. I think that's where a lot of the passion came from, and where most of the people that in this fandom that I truly like love and adore came from were these Man of Steel fans, people who just really felt really passionately about this movie, wanted to talk about this movie, felt like the conversation about the movie wasn't deep enough in the mainstream. And those, what a cool group of people in the first place. Like, you can join other fandoms and you can all have something that you love, that you have in common. But these are the people that literally came to the board and they were like, okay, here's the thing. The conversation isn't nuanced enough. The conversation isn't deep enough. It isn't in-depth enough. And, that takes a specific kind of, what I consider kind of, old-school fan. The kind of fan who really does want to roll in and pick everything apart and analyze its pieces and talk about, why there are so many horses in BVS, which is, my ultimate shame because I was like, just because, stop. And then Zach was like... and then Zach was like, actually, there are
Zach will come out and
reasons.
be like, the scratch on the wall is referring to
Oh,
this
it's
fable.
terrible. Every single time I'm put to shame. Every single time I'm like,
That's
no,
okay.
it's not that deep, guys. Back off. They're like, he's like, it is that deep. I literally have controlled everything in the frame. But for me, I mean, like, for me, that's like where it starts, is this, like, you know, if you don't like Man of Steel, like, honestly, I kind of cold shoulder those people in the fandom. Like, if they're like, yeah, like, my favorite movie is, like, you know, Batman versus Superman, and, like, Man of Steel was okay, I'm gonna be like, oh, okay, so we're probably not gonna be friends, but I respect that position. You sit over there. So, like, yeah, Man of Steel means a lot to me, and I think that before I became part of that fandom, specifically, I don't think I would have called myself a Superman fan at all, even. Like, I think I was, like, a person who loved Smallville, I was a person who, you know, enjoyed a couple Superman comics, and sort of, like, you know, liked the character all right, and it was really, at the time, actually my girlfriend's thing, and I totally stole it from her. But, like, the Man of Steel fandom kind of, like, radicalized me as a Superman fan and turned me into, like, a hardcore, like, you know, intense Superman reader, Superman, you know, connoisseur, working my way through Lois and Clark right now, which is something I thought I would never do. And that's all because of the fandom. That's because of the fandom, it's because of Man of Steel. It doesn't have anything to do with anything that came afterward. So, yeah, Man of Steel is a super huge turning point in my life. Just gigantic.
As I always like to say about Man of Steel is that it is a life-changing experience. And it's a catalyst for everything probably in each of our lives. Especially us coming together. And it was especially nice to see that Zack Snyder also celebrated with all of us. He is part of the fandom. And what I mostly like about Man of Steel, what I liked when I first saw it, is that I didn't even needed a sequel to this movie. Man of Steel, you can watch it as a completed story. It doesn't have a cliffhanger ending. It's a finished journey of Superman's origin. And if you look at Zack Snyder's filmography, you will see that he never did a sequel to any of his movies previously. And I thought that he will move on from Superman and do something else, but it seems that he loves Superman as a character so much that he decided to do another movie, and then he planned a third movie, and as it was previously revealed that there were supposed to be 5 movies, like how much you have to love Superman in order to break your own cycle of making each movie something brand new and spend 5 movies with the last son of Krypton. And Man of Steel is just redefined my love for the character, and it was especially great that it came out in 2013, because it was a really not a great time in comic books for DC, because New 52 were going for the second year, and Lois Lane was treated like really, really poorly in the comics, and Man of Steel was just something so amazing, and it came out on 75th anniversary of Superman, and it's just so many things happened at the same time, and I truly believe that Man of Steel is simply like a historical moment for humanity. Like, it's so colossal, it's so big of event that it really changed many lives for better. Honestly, I think that.
Agreed. I don't even know where to start. Except that I love it. I love every last little bit of it, you guys. I cannot believe it. I was never super person. Never. Batman was my guy, and I didn't really care about the big blue Boy Scout, you know. I was like, yes, he's lovely. Now, what about Batman? And so it was like, I guess we'll go see this movie, honey, you know. whatever. And we sit down and we come out and I'm like, holy crap! And he's like, it was okay. And I'm like, no, it was like, holy crap! I loved everything about it. I loved, I don't know, all the visuals, but especially the idea that he is a real 360-degree, full-blown person with feelings and doubts and wandering and emotions about his mother and, everything. It was just so wonderful. And I was like, holy crap, that Lois Lane is like the best Lois Lane I've ever seen. And I know there's plenty of others that are awesome. I just haven't seen them. So, I'm not insulting any other. It's just that I was so excited that they didn't even bother with the idea that she's in love with Superman and has no idea that Clark Kent is Superman. They just completely blew that out of the water and went, never mind, she's awesome and smart, and tracked him down to his mom's front door. And I'm like, I love it. So everything about it was so wonderful. I just came out thinking about it, wanting more of it, and it's always been the same. It's like I just need to sit down and watch that again because it's just such a beautiful film. It's so beautiful, you guys. It was so nice to find you guys too, because I honestly was like, I love Man of Steel, and then like the whole world freaked out about it, and I was like, I love Man of Steel. And so then when I happened to bump into you guys on Twitter, I was so excited because it was like, Tumblr. It was like, we could talk about the movie. I'm so excited, So it was like, finally, other people who like it, like I like it. Let's tear this bee apart. I'm so happy. And it was just, yeah. I like it.
Oh my gosh! I went to a friend's birthday party and she introduced me as the girl who liked Batman versus Superman.
And everybody else at the party went, "That's right, good movie, right? Right?"
Yeah, that's exactly the reaction that I got. Absolutely nothing else happened.
A fight was had.
Bunch your friend, man.
I'm sure you slayed many people.
It was a bunch of people I'd never met. Like that was the thing. It was a room full of people who'd never met me, and they were, and she was like, "Yeah, this is Danielle. She really liked Batman versus Superman." And I'm like, I don't really want the first thing that comes out of my mouth with this group of people to be like a giant defense of the film, but it definitely was. Like, I definitely just sat down and did my work. I was like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's unpack it.
Oh my God.
That person ever again without me right next to you, because I'll be like, that's right, and it was awesome. You want to talk about it? Come on, Danielle. And,
oh my
I'll
God.
draw all the attention on myself, and you can make friends.
Oh my God. That reminds me. Oh my. So I told you guys that, like, obviously I hinted at it earlier. So Amy revealed to me like a few months ago that she didn't like Batman v Superman at all. Lied to me that she liked it because we had like just started dating at the time when we had seen it. So she was worried that I was gonna break up with her over it if she didn't like it. So she lied to me. I mean, and I told her like I wouldn't have broken up with you. It would have sucked, but at that point I was used to people not liking it, so it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. And it's not. But so last week we were talking about so this past week we were just talking about it again, and then she's like, I have something else to reveal to you. I'm like, oh God, what is it now? And then she's like, you know how that one time you let me borrow Guardians of the Galaxy when we first started dating? I'm like, yeah. She's like, I never saw it. And I'm like, okay. Like, what's the reveal?
That's not as bad. She can watch it on her own time.
So cute. I love it.
I just thought it was funny because like she thought it was gonna be a bigger deal than what it was, and I'm like, oh, I could care less about that. It's Batman v Superman that hurt my feelings.
Amber just said in the chat, another thing, my experience with Man of Steel was kind of weird because I watched it for the first time after I watched BVS. I don't have such a strong connection to the movie like you guys, but I have always defended it because it truly made me love Clark and Superman. I liked how nuanced every character was, how strong the relationship with the woman in his life was, and how we need more heroes who are always soft, and I will fight anyone who calls my boy Clark broody. Saying
right, Amber.
Yeah.
Well said. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah. So, I think my experience with Man of Steel is I guess for me, with my experience with Man of Steel, it came to me because I didn't see it in the movie theaters. I saw it like a year after, and I don't know. This story's a little, but this Man of Steel came to me during a time where I was kind of in a dark place, I guess you can say, depression. And for me, I feel like Man of Steel was the film that came out during a time when I really needed it. Because for me, I was dealing with a lot of depression going on back then, and I didn't know where to go or who to turn to.
But out of, I guess, coincidence, because one of my friends who was also a fan of Superman said, "Hey, you should watch this movie. I think it's really cool." I'm like, I don't know, I'm not that big a Superman fan. But when I saw it, I really felt a sort of connection with Superman, because to me, he wasn't just the dude with the big red S and the cape. He was just a guy who didn't know where he belonged, a guy who didn't know what his purpose was or what he was literally put on the earth to do. But, you know, as he goes through these trials and tribulations with the aliens and stuff, he finds a silver lining. He finds victory in loss. And in doing so, like how he killed Zod, you know, it wasn't the perfect happy ending. It was just the ending that needed to happen. But I liked how at the end of the movie, he was still able to essentially find a sort of positive influence to it through his mother and through him coming to the Daily Planet. And I really appreciated that, because not only did it show me that Superman was more than just, you know, the big blue Boy Scout, it showed me that he was able to come out of the dark times that he went through, and essentially he was able to find, you know, a small glimmer of light that he held on to in all that dark stuff. And that's something that I always remember, and I always keep with me at all times. Not only that, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling on a bit.
No,
but there was a time, I think there was that moment where Clark was a kid, and, you know, he had that time where he was hearing everything, and he was like seeing through everything, and he had this moment where he just couldn't take it anymore, and he ran away, and then he freaked out and all that. And in that moment, I kind of felt that, because back then I used to go through the same thing where I had a lot of that going on, where I just had moments where I couldn't handle things. And I appreciated how, you know, Clark's mother came to be able to comfort him and to tell him that everything's going to be all right, you know? And what really made me tear up when I saw it the first time was when Clark looked at his mom and said, "What's wrong with me, Mom?" That really hit hard for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is beautiful, Al. And truly, like, that doesn't sound weird at all, and that's not a weird story. It's a beautiful story. And if you've heard Danielle and Nick talk about their losses and then seeing that movie, you are not the only one. This movie has touched people on a level that not every movie does, and that's a beautiful story. Just beautiful.
And I think we've had so many people in the fandom speak out about those kind of experiences, and I always am really, like, moved and touched by that.
Yes.
You know, people who have been talking about how, like, this is the first Superman who felt like they would, who made people feel like he would understand their depression or their anxiety or their autism or their struggle with coming out. I've heard a lot of really, like, you know, like, really moving stories. So, like,
yes.
I think that, you know, you're not alone there. And I think, you know, I'm really glad that you were willing to share that with us too.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, thanks.
Just wonderful. And I totally agree. That's why it resonated with me so much. That character, you know, it's because he was just a guy, and he wasn't the guy with the S on his chest. And, you know, you're right, watching his struggles as a child, watching, you know, him growing up isolated and stuff, it really kind of sunk it home. You know, he was a real person to me.
Yeah, it was like a true origin story. Like it made such an emphasis on everything that was around Clark, not on him the entire movie, but everything that made him Superman. And those first 20 minutes on Krypton, it's like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't describe in words, but watching that, it felt like I was watching a Star Wars movie, a good Star Wars movie. Like, so much effort was put just to show that Clark Kent Superman is an alien. Here where he comes from, here are his parents, how much they love him, like the emphasis on how much Jor-El and Lara felt for Kal-El to send him away, like those, and that music score, "Goodbye, My Son." Oh my god, it's just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hans Zimmer.
I had to
and-
take it off my pre-work
that, man.
soundtrack. I had to take it off because I kept bursting into tears before I go into work. It's not uplifting. I'm afraid that particular track doesn't help me get hyped. It's bad.
He does such beautiful work, though. Okay, I will say this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but you know, on the Man of Steel soundtrack. Sorry, when you get Hans Zimmer's sketchbook. No, I take it back. I love the sketchbook, but it's the one labeled General Zod, if I remember correctly. And have you ever noticed that there's a piece in there that's not ever actually in the film, and it's that slow kind of melancholy build to climax? I don't know if anybody. I'd have to go find the piece and play it.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I remember going, "What the heck? That's not in the film," and yet it's beautiful. And I think that I don't know anything for sure, but every time I hear it, it makes me think of Zod deliberately doing what it took to get himself killed. You know what I mean? It's weird because it kind of brings in the tragedy of his character along with the savagery that he is. I mean, he is an awesome character, but there's some tragedy in there that his entire reason for existing was for his people, and now that he has none, he has nothing, and he's not able to see that there's anything left. And that in itself is sad. And Zach said shortly after the film came out the first time that in a lot of ways, and this is going to be kind of weird and sensitive now because this was 5 years ago and a lot has happened in between, but he said that Zod's death very much was kind of a death by cop thing, where he purposely goaded the authority into killing him because he didn't want to live. You know what I mean? Now, granted, now we all go, whoa, cops killing people, that's a sensitive area. And that's fair. But it was weird how he said that, and then you hear the music, and it's actually really beautiful. And I don't know why, but it always gives me a slightly deeper and more nuanced understanding of this villain than I have before, and it's just weird to me because I don't connect with villains that much. Usually I'm they're bad, and so that's one of the things that I love about that film is that Zod is so real a character, and that there's so much to it.
Everybody?
I think Zod... Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say everybody talks about their Man of Steel experience. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I haven't gone yet, I don't think.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think
Sorry. You can go first now, it's okay. I don't have much to say, so you can go ahead.
I think with Zod, I think he wanted to die, but because of the whole Kryptonian mind thing, how Kryptonians are predetermined to do this and that.
Yeah.
I think something in Zod wanted to die, but the pre-programming in his mind wouldn't let him. And so he let out that depression in the form of rage, and that's why he literally fought, Clark to the bitter end, because in the end he did want to die, but the whole warrior Krypton thing wouldn't let him.
Yeah, well, and we've always talked about how Kryptonians were far more warlike than us. You know what I mean? They were built on the back of that far more, and anger is actually one of the calling cards of depression. Not everybody exhibits it, but my father has a legendary temper, and I mean legendary. And he long ago discovered that when he was on antidepressants, it helped his temper because much of how he was exhibiting his depression came out in anger. And so I think that's a really valid and insightful comment, Al. That's really cool because you're right. In a lot of ways, I think, he was depressed, but it all came out with anger and aggression, which is really fascinating.
Well, I just think, honestly, go ahead. Actually,
okay, we gotta let Rebecca go.
Rebecca, go ahead. Sorry. Go, Rebecca.
I've deferred all of us.
I mean, he even goes as far as to make an ultimate to Clark that this ends only one way, Cal. Either you die or I do. And I honestly thought that, okay, here we go again. A villain makes a point and by the end of the movie, it will be most likely that Superman will have some Deus Ex Machina option that will allow him to make everything to be resolved in happy ending. But no, this time villain's ultimate was concluded in the way that he wanted it. So it ended with his death, and now Superman have to deal with this, with this hard situation that he was never put in before, nor in live action, nor in the comic books. And I like that the most about Man of Steel is that it finally decided to put Superman where he was never before, in a world where rules are different, and he has to deal with consequences of his actions.
Agreed. Totally agreed.
Rebecca, if you want to just go ahead.
Yeah, go baby, go!
Okay, so when I saw Man of Steel, I was like, what year was this? I didn't see it when it came in theaters. Because, I noticed, because, the trailers are out and stuff, but I didn't see it. At this point in my life, I was not seeing superhero movies in theaters because I was just watching them all on TV, because the X-Men movies were on TV.
There you go.
And, even when the X-Men movies came out, I was just watching them on TV when they came out. Things take, 2 years to get on cable. So, I saw Man of Steel in 2015, and I had the benefit of not being a part of the discourse because all of my comic book movie enjoyment was just personal at home. So I didn't know about the discourse, except I went to go with a friend, and her dad and her brothers were talking about Man of Steel, so the whole Zod thing about Zod dying got spoiled for me, unfortunately. Everything always has to get spoiled at some point.
It does.
Unfortunately. But I watched the movie knowing that Zod was going to die, so I kind of knew that it was going to be dark. And so I watched it, and honestly, I did not have this eye-opening experience, oh my gosh, best movie ever. To be honest, still, I don't think that it is the best movie ever. I'm really impressed with it, and I'm a sucker for character, basically. I know you guys were talking about Twilight earlier, and I was like, oh, Twilight. A lot of people say Twilight isn't the best written thing in the world, and I don't think it is, to be honest with you. Maybe, I don't know. But I'm a sucker for character, and if I like the characters in something, then I'm gonna like the thing. I love the DCEU, even though I don't think always that the movies are the best thing ever, but I'm a sucker for characters, and I'm really into that. And I love the new Star Wars sequels, because of the characters, and there's a lot of things that I like because of the characters in it particularly. And so Man of Steel it impressed me because Superman was not something I was interested in before. The metaphor that I use in my head when I talk to myself about these things is that Clark was the bread in the Justice League sandwich. You don't eat a sandwich so that you can eat bread. Nobody eats a sandwich thinking, I want to eat some bread, let's make a sandwich. You just kind of need him there because he's just part of the sandwich, I was a big fan of the Justice League Unlimited show growing up. And I was basically interested in everyone except Superman. I thought Batman was cool, I thought Wonder Woman was cool, Martian Manhunter, Hawk Girl, Green Lantern, everybody was cool except Superman. I was just Superman is there, he's bread, he's Superman, whatever. And I never watched Christopher Reeve or anything, so all of my knowledge about what Superman is was basically from Justice League and just from pop culture. So I didn't really have any strong opinions about any of this. So I saw Man of Steel and I was well, this is nice because he is a believable character now. Lois Lane knows his identity. She's not with that one, I forgot what the guy's name is, but in the behind the scenes he was saying, Zach and I tried to do it so she doesn't know, but she just looks like an idiot, if she doesn't know, she looks like an idiot.
Yeah, that was the writer. Oh gosh, it was I can't say his name now, you guys. The guy who wrote Man of Steel, Goyer.
Goyer, yeah.
It was Goyer, yeah.
It was Goyer.
And I loved that.
Yeah. Anyways, like, so I thought that was cool and everything, and obviously Michael Shannon is terrifying in every good way, and Fiora, and like everything was really cool about the movie and stuff. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't think it was like the best thing ever, but I'm like really into characters and stuff, and I like the characters, and I appreciated the cinematography and everything. And I don't know why, but when I was watching the movie, like, the music didn't punch me, but when you go back and you listen to it online, I was like, this is the best soundtrack in the history of the world. Hans got snubbed for an Oscar. They're denying him his rightful awards. Like, this is the greatest soundtrack in the history of soundtracks. But yeah, like, and then Batman v Superman was being advertised, and I was like, this is great. This is a perfect continuation of Man of Steel. I really respect what Zack is doing with this. Even though I didn't even, like, I wasn't a Zack Snyder fan at that point. I wasn't a Zack Snyder fan until, like, after I saw BVS, and that was, like, a while after I saw BVS. Like, honestly, I didn't become a DCEU fan until after Suicide Squad. But really, like, my attention to these movies and, like, deciding to see them in theaters was basically from just a respect of what they were doing, and not because I was, like, a fan yet or anything. I just respected what they were doing, and at this point, like, I'm so invested in the characters and everything, and so invested in Zack and all the creative people working with him behind the scenes, and so that's basically the impact of Man of Steel. It kind of gave me, like, respect for, like, another version of Superman, different from, like, pop culture, how we kind of think of him, and, like, the respect for, like, everybody that worked on the movie, you know, the actors, and Zack and Hans and David and everybody.
Well, that's, like, the funny thing too.
That's
like,
awesome.
Watching Man of Steel for the first time, like, especially, like, now, like, looking back, like, especially after Justice League, you're right, there was such a respect because, like, Zack trusted his actors to be able to do what they were able to do with their characters in the film. Like, then looking at Justice League, like, Joss, like, I don't know what the fuck he did.
Nobody knows.
but like you let like someone like Henry, who like Man of Steel was like really what kickstarted his film career, his major film career. Like, yes, he was in Immortals, he was in smaller things. So, like, Man of Steel like really like got him in more of the public eye. And what he was able to do with, I know a lot of people complain about him not having a ton of lines in the movies, whatever. But I think some of his best acting is when he's not speaking, is when it's just like just an expression, or like just like what he's able to do in silence. And I think that's so powerful. And not very many directors allow an actor, especially like an up and coming actor like Henry kind of was at the time, to really do that. And that's one of the many things I loved about Man of Steel. And for me, like, and I've kind of told this story before, and that, like, for me, like, I went in already being a diehard Superman fan. Like, I've been a diehard Superman fan ever since I was a kid, and I watched every single episode of Smallville. Like, I saw Superman Returns in theaters. That was, like, my first, like, theatrical experience for a Superman film. And I loved being a Superman fan. I watched everything Superman related, whether it was the cartoons or, again, Smallville or whatever. And I was open to pretty much any interpretation of the character. Like, I wasn't set on, like, oh, everything has to be like the Christopher Reeve version. I liked, like, what Smallville was able to do in, like, honoring the Christopher Reeve version, but still letting Tom Welling be Tom Welling's version of Clark Kent. And, like, watching Man of Steel, like, so, like, Man of Steel for me, I was not worried, but, like, because it was still, like, a couple years off of Smallville, so I still had Smallville, it was still pretty fresh in my mind. And I was reading the Smallville season 11 comic book series at the time, so it was still, like, Smallville was still kind of going on for me, and Smallville was a big part of why I was still a Superman fan. Man of Steel for me just impressed me on so many levels because it allowed the character to, like, come into the modern world without disrespecting everything that came before, or, like, just being a carbon copy of Reeve or like another era. Like, it felt like he let Henry Superman be Henry Superman, and to let him really come into his own in the character. And for me, in seeing Clark's characterization throughout the entire film, I have never related to the character more than in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. And this is coming from a lifelong Superman fan. Like I've loved him for years, but Man of Steel and Batman v Superman cemented why I love the character so much. And again, before that, I can enjoy the character, but I couldn't necessarily completely relate to his story. Man of Steel made me relate to him so much more, and Zack and Henry really did that, and also gave us so many great interpretations of these characters, and seeing everyone's dynamic, like allowing Amy Adams to play Lois Lane in a way that's not like just one-dimensional or just being the love interest. She was so much more than that. She had such a huge pivotal role in the film, and her relationship with Clark and with Perry and with everyone, I just felt like there was so much respect given to the actors and the story of Man of Steel that I feel like is really underappreciated in Hollywood and in film today. Like you don't have very many directors go onto a project of that size and give the actors that much freedom to take the characters into new and different places. And Zack was able to do that, and I will always appreciate that. And like Man of Steel, like always makes me emotional. It just means so much to me, and I love every second of that movie. It's funny because I re-listen to our podcast sometimes on my drive homes from work or whatever, just because. And sorry, there's some like background noise or something going on.
That was wild.
Yeah.
I think that was me. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So like in the last few days, I've actually been like re-listening to our Man of Steel commentary, and it's just like, even then, just re-experiencing like our own thoughts and experiences throughout that, and listening to all of your guys' own experiences with the film. Not very many comic book films have really been able to resonate with so many people the way that Man of Steel has. And I will always appreciate what Zack and his whole team were able to do, and it's why, like, Man of Steel will always be one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, no one's ever gonna change that for me.
Yep. Well said.
So if anyone else has something that they'd like to share, because I feel like that was really emotional.
Somebody please pay attention. Distract from me.
Yeah, I guess one thing that I can share is one of the things I do appreciate about Man of Steel was that it wasn't afraid to go against the norm of Superman. Because in this time now, a lot of people, they praise Christopher Reeve movies for Superman, and they always go to that movie. They always go to the Christopher Reeve version of Superman for, to do anything Superman related. And one thing that I appreciate about Man of Steel was that it decided to go to a different sort of style with Superman. Because I think what's his name? The person who worked closely with Zack Snyder, who also did The Dark Knight Returns animated.
Jay
Oliver.
No?
Oliver? Yeah.
Oliver.
Jay
Yeah. Jay
Olivier.
Oliver.
Yeah, because Jay Olivia, because he was talking about one thing that I actually found interesting, because what he was talking about was the comparison of how Clark was raised in the Reeves times versus how he was raised now.
Yeah, I read that.
During the Reeves times, it was post-World War II, and thus he was raised on those old American sensibilities of, truth and justice. However, this Clark, and thus he was raised in, that time period of the 70s. But this Clark was raised, post 9/11 and post all this other stuff that's been going on. So that's why he's very different from the Reeves version. It's just a gap in the times that they went through. And I just
important,
He made an excellent point with that, and it was really like, oh my gosh, you're totally right. You totally are. Which is why I think it was so jarring when the Truth and Justice line came out, and it was suddenly so corny in Justice League, and it was like, but that's not what he ever has been. What is this? What is this? And you're right, it just felt like they threw back, way further than they meant to, and came out with this totally different version. It was weird.
Yeah. Another thing that I do appreciate, and I know I'm saying so much appreciation, but I can't help it. I loved how during this one moment in Man of Steel, when it was Clark and the World Engine, it also focused on Perry, who, decided to stay behind to save that one lady. Jenny. Yeah, I liked that moment because it showed, you don't have to have superpowers to be a hero. Sometimes it's just being there for someone at the most crucial time.
Yeah.
And I liked that moment out of pretty much a lot of them. Well, I liked all the moments of Man of Steel, but that moment really stuck to me the most because it was just a very human moment in the purest form.
Yes, it was so beautiful, and I gotta say, I loved all the different takes because you had Jenny who's trapped and freaking out, but then you had Perry who immediately goes to help, and then he yells at Lombard who like legit wants to just go. And then he's like, crap, and then goes to help, But like, so everybody had a different perspective, and it wasn't like Lombard just went trotting in like, yeah, because that's not really Lombard's way. That's not who he is. But when it came right down to it, it was like, yeah, okay, I just can't, live with myself if I just run, So it was neat to see the different aspects of bravery, and the different aspects of how people respond to certain things, and it was. I don't know. It was so beautiful because I agree. That moment when he grabs her hand and she looks at him and she realizes that they're all dead. They're like imminent dead. And Perry knows it, but he's not going to leave. And that was just, that's really beautiful film, guys.
I think Perry is like amazing because it's like I always think the way I think of it is that like he's their dad,
Yeah.
Like. Like especially after Black Zero, like something as traumatizing as that, and to have people still with you who went through it with you, like I feel like he's just like their father, and even though he's hard on them and stuff, like that he really loves them and he's always looking out for them and stuff like that.
Yeah, he has high expectations, but but yeah,
and,
he always comes through in the clutch.
And all he wanted was a sports vehicle.
No, is that too much to ask? I mean, come on.
Again, taking that scene into consideration with Perry, one of the popular complaints about Man of Steel was that Superman is not Supermaning enough in this movie, and
what's he supposed to be doing? Honestly,
he's supposed to do everything, like literally everything. But in my opinion, he did the most Superman thing that this character can possibly do. He inspired people to be like him, and Perry White, Wahlberg, and even Lois and the USA soldiers, like they all were acting heroic because they witnessed Superman and his actions, and they learned his story, and I think all of that about Superman it simply inspired them to be a better people, and this is exactly what Perry was doing. He was Superman in that moment, without superpowers, because sometimes in order to be Superman, you just need to be in the right time, in the right moment, close with people who need somebody to be with them at the right moment. And this movie is beautiful. Like,
well, was it Jimenez who actually posted like his favorite cover, his favorite Superman comic cover, and it was actually just a picture of like the crowd underneath Superman's shadow. And I think that sort of drives home kind of like what the mentality that Snyder's coming from when it comes to Superman is, and sort of why this movie, for me and for a lot of other people, for all of us, is more true to the idea of Superman that we think is, canon, the idea that's represented in the comics, which is this idea that like Superman is more than Clark Kent. Superman is an idea. Superman is all-encompassing. And if you're not focusing on the little people in this story, if you're not focusing on the smaller people, if you're not focusing on the everyday acts of heroism, then you're not really capturing the essence of what Superman is, which is bigger than Clark, bigger than Krypton, bigger than the planet. It's a big idea. And Zach gets that like no one else does, and that's why I'm so nervous about anybody else doing a Superman movie ever.
I think Superman isn't important if it's all about him. Like if it's all about him, what's the significance? Why do we care?
Yeah.
It's all about him.
And
We're
this-
not escaping that white male patriarchal bullshit thing that, I mean, like, no offense, but JLU really pushes in terms of Superman. Is like he represents, you know, authority and patriarchy and, you know, the dominant status quo. And I think a lot of people who see Superman from the outside definitely see that because they haven't actually looked into the story and they haven't actually, like, you know, looked into what the story being told actually is. And the story being told is so much more than that. And I think that if you don't make it about more than Clark, if you don't make it about more than Superman, then what you have is a pretty bland story in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why in Man of Steel they focus so much more on the other characters and just Clark Kent rather than, you know, Clark Kent in the super suit. Because I noticed that when I watched it again, because there's actually not as much Superman scenes as there are Clark and the rest of the cast scenes. Because I feel like Superman as a whole should be like this sort of, I don't know, this sort of figure that washes over people and inspires them to be better. And this was the difference that I felt between Man of Steel and Justice League when it came to focusing on the little people. Because with Man of Steel, it focused on them with a purpose, but with Justice League, it was just this small family of people who just happened to get caught in the crossfire and had no significance.
Yeah, it's also like, I think the difference really is like what, like, people being there to do things and to be impacted and to impact versus to be there to be like pitied and saved, you know.
It felt token. They felt very token. These are the token people, the token little people that should be saved to prove that he's such a great hero. And then on we move. And you're right. It was very.
Well, we're not even concerned about how they
adaptable.
feel about the situation, as much as we are about how they can serve as comic relief and how they can demonstrate how strong the hero is. Which, to be fair, is the role of those people in most superhero movies. But you cannot make most superhero movies when you're making a Superman movie. You have to make something bigger and something more important. You just have to. You don't have a choice. And one of the things about Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman is there are so many actors in these films. And half of those actors are just there to stand in a spot and feel emotions. They're just there to feel something. And that matters as much as them having agency, as much as them having, you know, lines, as much as them having, you know, any kind of impact on the situation. That matters because it really, like, it makes them real. And I think that's a lot of what's upsetting about Snyder's work to people is, you know, and I've been arguing this for a long time, but I really do think that they just don't like feeling like those people are real. They don't like feeling like those people are real because they feel that danger and they get upset and they have a very negative feeling about it. And they think that means the film failed, when in fact the film wants you to be really sad that people are in danger. It wants you to be really upset that people are in jeopardy. It wants you to be really sad that people are sad. And, you know, that shouldn't be an escapable feeling. Like, if you're going to make movies about people blowing up, you need to care about the people who are blowing up. You just do. I'm sorry. Like,
Totally agree.
And, you know, my favorite part about, as we were talking about Superman as an idea, I like how the core of the story was about making a choice, the ability to have to make a choice. And all of the Jor-El speeches are like, I just want them to print on my wall because they're so inspirational. And every time he talks with his son, he says he doesn't tell him that he has to go and just do everything for humanity. He tells him that he should inspire humanity to be able to make a choice just like he can now. That he and Lara saved him in order to represent this ability to make a better decisions in your life. And this is where this scene, as you mentioned, with Lombard comes in, when he kind of wants to leave, but he decides to make a better decision. Mm-hmm. And this movie was all about that the ability to choices.
Yes, definitely.
Well, and I would
Okay.
argue that Martha and Jonathan
I'm just going to point out that Amber says, I agree with Danielle, we need more regular, non-powered people on this movie, or on these movies, because it makes a good contrast to the heroes. And she's right. Sorry, continue.
And no, non-powered is better than underpowered.
Yeah. Did I say no? I use non-powered, right? Yeah. Underpowered is weird.
But I think that's something too that Jonathan and Martha bring that makes Clark already subversive of his Kryptonian, I don't know, heritage, is that Jor-El is kind of like, oh, well, you should do this and this and this, but, obviously, like, you're going to make different choices because you're human. And the human element is Jonathan sitting there and being like, if you don't want to be a superhero, you don't have to be a superhero. And Martha saying, like, if you want to walk away from this, you can absolutely walk away from this. Like, no one's making you be a superhero. Just because you have the ability to save the world doesn't mean that you owe anybody anything. And that's, I think, I think it's really important. I think it's important in the way that it made everyone so very angry.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that it made everyone angry showed us something about us, is this idea that, Superman is, like, he owes us something because he has the ability to do something about it. And it's like, well, a lot of people have the ability to do something about it, but, it's not necessarily a situation where you should feel obliged to press people into servitude because they have the abilities that you need. Superman can do whatever he wants, and the fact that he chooses to be Superman is way more powerful than Jonathan Kent following him around with a rolled up newspaper for his entire life. This is the way, this is the way that Smallville always made me feel, and I'm so glad that Snyder sort of took that out of his interpretation and kind of said, like, well, what if they were just really good parents? Like, what if it wasn't even about what he must do? It was about, Jonathan and Martha just being really sympathetic and being really empathetic and really understanding Clark's point of view, and that inspiring empathy in their son, the way that parenting actually pretty much works.
Yep. Well,
which is that, like, you can tell them not
choice,
yeah, you can tell them not to do drugs until you're blue in the face, but you can't stop them from doing drugs, and telling them not to do drugs is way, way less effective than just modeling a drug-free place, just modeling what it looks like. Like, if you're a heroin addict and you tell your child not to do drugs, it's not going to be very effective. It's just not. But that's the thing, is that, like, that modeling is so powerful. And I think a lot of people took issue with the idea of being kind to your child, which is so scary to me. It's just, every time it comes up, I'm just, like, really upset about it, because I'm like, what about being really kind to Clark Kent makes you so angry, and why? Like, that's scary. Like, it's especially Clark Kent at, like, 12. Why do you think he needs to be mean? Why do you think he needs someone to be mean to him? What do you think that helps?
I want to kind of go off of what you're saying about, like, the choice and the parents giving Clark a choice, because something that bothered me about the Superman with Reeves, like the Superman the movie, is, like, not to say that I didn't enjoy the movie, but this one particular thing bothered me, was the fact that there was no choice moment. Jor-El was just like, he was like, I want to find out who I am. He found out who he was, he met the Jor-El hologram, and Jor-El proceeds to teach him everything in the universe, apparently, which is okay, I guess. But, like, the fact that there was no choice moment, like, at the end of that epic science lesson, he just became Superman and flew out into the world to Superman. And I'm just like, wait, how did it being given an education, like a literal education, scholarly information by your biological father, lead you to becoming Superman? Like, he didn't choose, he didn't say, yes, I am from Krypton, Earth is my home now, I have the ability to protect people, I'm gonna do that with my life. He just gets this epic lesson, is an adult by this time and says, yes, now I'm going to Superman. It's like, but how do you know you're supposed to do that? Like, what led you to make that decision, you know?
Yep, and that fulfills the expectation that in discovering what/who he is or why he has powers or whatever, he will automatically accept the mantle of being the savior to this world. You know, that's almost a more religious way of looking at it, you know, and it's like, that's not really, I agree, that's not really what I want to see. I want to see somebody who truly has the option one way or the other, and then decides this is the way they want to go. You know, even Jor-El was honest about the fact that, like, they couldn't come with him because they were tainted by Krypton, and they wanted him to, like, you know, have a better future of choice, you know, that even his own parents would change that aspect, you know, and then they wanted him to be a bridge, not the, you know, mini dome covering everybody and keeping them safe from all harm every time, but, you know, the bridge between understanding of two different peoples. You know, these are all things that Clark has to choose, and I agree, the whole motif of choice throughout the film is beautiful, and I don't like how the old movie, no offense, I love Reeves, but, you know, I don't like how it just naturally assumes that because he finds out who he is and that he has these powers, he's going to, without even a second thought or even a moment not, you know, like, acknowledged on screen, become, you know, Superman. You're right.
I do think, like, one of the things is that I did rewatch the first film over Christmas for the first time in a long time, and I felt that gap there. I did definitely feel that. I was like, wow, there's like a whole, like, 3 hours of this film missing. Like, everything I wanted to see is gone. But I do think that, like, Reeves' Superman definitely faces his trials and tribulations later on. I think that the order in which they struggle with their mantle is very different. And I think I like Zack Snyder's approach better, but I do think that there is some struggle. It's just down the road. It's when he actually realizes the consequences in the Reeve films. But I wonder if what's at stake here isn't necessarily intrinsic goodness. This idea of sort of like you're either good or you're bad on the inside, and that nothing can change that. So that, like, you know, I'm always really interested in, like, why people are so angry about this film. It's going to be a constant fascination for me for the rest of my life, because, like, it's amazing how, like, pissed off people are about, like, essentially a really innocent sort of what people have said is really, really poignant, earnest narrative. This narrative is so forthright and so sort of like, well, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened, and there's nothing edgy or mysterious about it. There's nothing self-referential. It's just a story, and it's a really well-told one with a lot of really valuable characters in it. But at the end of the day, it's just a story, and people are so mad. And it always just sort of amazes me when it comes up. Just the anger.
I think a lot of the problems that people claim to have in the movie come from their own perception of who they think Superman is supposed to be in their eyes. Because Superman isn't this stone cold, I am the man kind of mentality, that, like, the moment he starts to show any sort of emotion, oh no, he's emo. Like,
I don't understand that. Like, I'm like, he is so desirable now because he is soft. Like, I love a soft boy.
Right? Well, like, oh my gosh, he's actually, like, I don't know, you know, approachable and, you know, not throwing alpha male around and you know,
so
has consideration for other people. What is this? You know, I don't know.
The genre is starving for that, and it's just another type of person. But, you know, as far as, like, subverting masculinity, this is a huge win. Like, and I think whether people want to admit it or not, Man of Steel had a really large ripple effect. Like, I don't think Logan, not to spoil anything, but but I don't think it's not spoilery. It's not spoilery. Okay.
It's good.
I don't think Logan would have had the depth of emotion. I don't think that there would have been room for Logan to have the depth of emotion that he had in Logan if Man of Steel didn't come first. And I think that there's evidence for that. There's evidence for Man of Steel inspiring people, and I think that it's the best sort of evidence, which is people saying, like, well, here's the thing, like, I just wanted this character to be sad about this. Like, I just wanted this character to be able to openly cry. I just wanted this character to be able to be really emotional and to be able to, like, not, you know, walk away straight-faced from an explosion. I wanted them to actually look at the carnage of their life and be upset about it. And I think that there's a certain generational change that might be happening in terms of that, and it might be more of a larger trend that Zack just tapped into. But in the genre, I think he has a lot of effect on the way that these heroes are allowed to wield their masculinity. And I think it's gotten, even in the MCU movies, it's gotten quieter and quieter. It's kind of gotten to this point where it's like, you know, it's embarrassing to do anything more now. And I think that Man of Steel did that. I think Man of Steel made it very silly for giant masculinities that were impenetrable to exist. He made it very silly just by making a super earnest movie, and everyone was like, oh, well, this kind of embarrasses me because, you know, my big dick swingy main character, he just rolled in and, you know, now he looks stupid. Why does he look stupid? I can't really tell, but I should fix it. And that kind of thing.
You might have a good point there, though, because and I maybe part of this is comic book centric, and I just don't know, and I haven't seen it yet. I'm so sorry, you guys. I have the DVD. It's like on my list, but I haven't seen Black Panther either. Okay, so I've been really bad. Anyway, but I've heard good things about Charla as well in that film, and that, like, you know, heaven forbid, he actually, like, you know, thinks about things and wrestles with things and has a good relationship with his mother, and you know what I mean? It's like, I've heard good things about him coming from that, and I'm not going to say that's all Man of Steel either, but I agree with you that I think it kind of tipped off some kind of movement to where it was like, all right, so, you know, what else do we do with this guy? Well, you know, this approach isn't unheard of now, you know, let's go with that. And you know, I don't know. I'm very excited to see it. So basically, I was just in a cave of hibernation for, like, you know, 2 years. So I'm slowly emerging.
Well, when we left Black Panther, actually, my girlfriend immediately said, she was like, that was the most Superman character that's ever been in the MCU. Like, he gets the closest.
Yeah. And
the idea of what we want Clark Kent to be.
Yeah, I felt that for him greatly, even in Civil War, excuse me. Avengers 2.5, you know, but, like, the only standout of that entire movie that, you know, I watched with a giant sneer on my face was him. Because he actually, you know, he had emotions, and he was a little more soft-spoken, you know, and he was on a rage, you know, vengeance spree, but right at the end, of course, you know, when he suddenly kind of gets confronted, you know, that's all I'll say, you know, the way he handled that situation was beautiful to me, you know, and especially his line about being consumed with hatred, and it was like, wow, who's that guy? I like him, you know, and he stuck out for me, and it was like, dude, I need to go see. So yeah, Black Panther's been on my list forever, and I actually have the DVD in my hand now, so, you know, we're gonna do that soon, because
fair warning about that,
was
actually.
Very nice. So
fair warning about Black Panther, actually, and I think I said this in my review. Fair warning, though, the Black Panther that you see in Civil War and the Black Panther that you see in his solo movie are two very different Black Panthers.
Damn it!
I didn't pick up on that. I didn't think that.
I mean, I felt like it was public persona versus private persona in a lot of ways to me. Like we got a lot of vulnerability from him because he was hanging out with his people. All of his people, like, you know, like every intimate relationship in his life is pretty much showcased in that film. So yeah, I think he is really different, but not in a way that I think breaks character so much as just deepens the character.
That's exciting. I can go for that. I will sit down and watch.
On the subject of Civil War, like what Katie was saying about like T'Challa being soft-spoken and everything and kind of being drawn to him because of that, like that is the same reason that him and Vision are like my biggest people in that movie.
Yes,
like I
same.
love Vision. No one appreciates Vision. I'm like, he is soft-spoken.
Exactly.
He is intelligent. He is everything good. He's played by Paul Bettany, which is even better. Like, honestly, all of the guys, like him and T'Challa stole that movie for me.
Yeah, I loved Vision.
He's
Pretty much
everything
all
Thor
the-
used to be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Like,
I
Vision-
haven't even seen Ragnarok, and I miss old Thor, you know. So
yeah. Vision is the most, I think, the purest human, even though he's not human.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was something that reminded me of Superman very much because on the end, it wasn't about being good or evil. It was about being on the side that preserves life. And I felt such a connection with Vision more than I did a lot of other MCU characters. And that's why I was so pissed when he was killed off in Infinity.
No! Spoilers, bro!
I've been spoiled.
Nick,
Oh,
I
God,
you
know,
better
I
edit
got
that
in the car and I was like,
Oh,
hit me with everybody.
sorry.
So I know.
I'm
It's
sorry.
Edit it out.
I'm sorry if anybody else got spoiled, but like legit, I've been
Oh,
spoiled.
God.
I'm like, So it's all good.
Oh, no.
Wait,
I'm sorry.
but besides
I'm
Katie, has
sorry.
anyone else not seen Infinity War?
This is
Ah.
this is unprintable now. Thank you. We're ruined.
I am
Over.
so sorry. Oh, no. I messed up.
I mean, come on, people. This is why you never, ever spoil, like, ever. Doesn't matter. Unless we're talking about DC, you know.
Okay, okay, I'll say this. In all fairness,
People are like, spoilers, and I'm like, but it's been 20 years. Like, surely I can talk about it, right?
but the funny thing is, like, this has happened in the podcast a couple of times. No one ever complains because I think we're primarily DC fans, and for the most part, if you aren't gonna see a movie, if you don't see the movie, I'll say in the first couple months, you're either not gonna see it or it's gonna be a while. So the people who we
it's
have
like, if
accidentally
you're on the internet,
spoiled.
You're spoiled, man. You know, I've just kind of come to grips with that.
I have not seen it, but I've been extensively spoiled. Very, very
I've been
spoiled.
extensively spoiled because I seriously just demanded my daughter unload and tell me everything after she saw it because she was so disturbed just getting back in the car after going to the birthday party. She sat down and I'm like, okay, talk to me. She's like, I don't want to spoil you. And I'm like, dude, come on. I'm going to be completely ruined by the time this weekend's over anyway. Just hit me. And she was like, ah. And yeah, I know all of them. So it's okay.
Anyway,
Oh,
Vision is the purest. He is so pure. I love him. Anyone who doesn't, honestly, this is why when people hate on Age of Ultron. I'm like, first of all, I enjoyed Age of Ultron, and second of all, Vision is in that movie, and I love Vision. So
Okay, I'll say this too. I know. So to kind of like.
Vision is ultimately better.
yes,
Yes, so
he
I'll
elevates-
say this. Like,
He's
kind of,
gonna elevate this universe if they let him, but you know they won't.
You know, so like legit, then there's a good reason for him to be able to pick up Thor's hammer in Age of Ultron. Then,
Yes.
so
okay,
Yeah.
I'll say this to
maybe,
kind
like,
of.
he lacked all the baggage that us humans have, and that's what makes him the most human of us all, or the most pure human of us all. You know, because we all have such baggage, it messes us up. So.
Okay, I just want to say this to kind of cap off this part of the conversation. I agree. Vision is the best part of Age of Ultron. I said that from the first time I saw it, and I still enjoyed the movie. Looking back, when I think the rest of the movie is garbage, Vision is the purest thing in that movie. He just is.
Yes, he.
With that being said, after Civil War and Infinity War, like, I don't care. I'm not saying that the character's gotten like bad or soured for me. I just care about the character a little less.
It's
I
very
think he hasn't been corrupted, to be honest. Everyone else has kind of been corrupted. Not everybody, but like Vision is pure to me. Like he has not been corrupted at all in this whole
over
process.
time, though, you're right. The longer they go, the more they kind of change, and you discover that your first love for whatever character it is, you know, may not be the same way you like them by the end if you still like them, because often stuff like this that go on for a long time, their characters change over time, and they kind of morph and change into different things, and what you fell in love with may not still be there at the end, or it might, but not. It's been kind of tempered by other things that came up. It's a very weird thing to keep characters going for a long time and not accidentally even corrupt them from what they started as. It's
Yeah,
hard. It's really hard.
I don't think Vision was corrupted. I think with Vision, he was beginning to, I guess he was beginning to see the fallacies of what he is. Like, for example, when he shot Rhodey,
Yeah.
like, that was on accident. That never happens to me. It's like he's starting to feel different. Like there's something different brewing in him. And I would have loved to have seen more of that.
I think we will.
That would
Yeah,
be
I don't know.
most
We'll see.
fascinating to be like, he's actually discovering, okay, there's consequences here. And you're right, being, what he is, there's less room for error. And so actually having error with consequences would be like, wow, I don't like this. How do I deal with this? And then you get to see him become, understand what humans wrestle with all the time, That would be kind of cool.
He needs
That's
his
why
own movie, but they're not going to do it.
I
Yeah,
want a
Yeah,
Vision.
we'll see. We'll see.
I can think of lots of characters that need their own movie. So, Cyborg! And,
Yes, I agree with your statement. I need a Cyborg movie ever since Justice League, because Ray Fisher fucking kicked ass.
Yes.
Maybe doesn't see it, but he did. So back to Man of Steel. After a long stint in the MCU.
I could talk about Vision forever, to be honest.
we should do a
Same.
Bitter Nerds pod, like legit. We should bring Rebecca on and Al and just let them talk it out, and that would be awesome.
That
I will
would be
listen with a big smile on my face, and I'll just be the host. So,
We could call it totally salvageable MCU characters.
What's left of them
we
anyway?
don't hate everything MCU,
It's a list. There's a list. It's a short list.
dang
But there's
it.
a list.
See, if we
Things
called
that are
it that, I would totally be arguing for Tony Stark in all of his solo movies, because every one of his solo movies just so much good stuff with his character that he needs, but every time they do a team
Yeah.
up, they destroy it for the sake of him acting
Just
like
like
an idiot.
They do. They
Iron Man
change it
3.
to make it what
I
they need
love
for the
Iron Man
plot,
3.
and that's so
I love
frustrating.
it. Seriously.
Iron Man 3, I did really like him, and I didn't want to. I spent the entire movie being like, no, I don't want to be your friend. I don't want to be your friend. Stop it. You're making me your friend right now. This is terrible. And but that's the thing, is that those group movies just assassinate him, and I think that for me, Steve is a little bit more resilient in that way. And makes me want to protect him a little bit more. Like I'm like,
I
well,
honestly just feel for Steve.
those are things that Joss Whedon said. That's not stuff Steve said. Don't worry about it. Steve didn't say those things. Joss wrote them, and then Chris Evans had to say them.
Every
That's
time
pretty
you watch
much how I
Joss
feel about most
it's
of
like,
Justice
okay,
League. Like
Clark didn't say
every
that.
like
That's
no,
Joss.
not you.
Yeah, that's Joss. That was not something that my son Steve Rogers would ever say. So
My son Batman never uttered, "Oh yeah, something's definitely broken." Anyway,
Yeah.
back to
And sorry,
okay, so Amber.
sorry.
Before we go back, Amber says the only thing she liked from Age of Ultron was the Barton family, which is like the most unpopular opinion. And I gotta say, I liked them too. I'm sorry, but it's true.
oh my god,
Amber and I can hang out together.
that could be a
I
whole
totally
thing.
got the vibes in the first Avengers that people were all talking about with him and Black Widow. I got it. But at the same time, for me, it was kind of a cool thing to have the idea that, look, people can actually be supportive of each other and really close and stuff like that, and have it be platonic. And so because they so often just cram them together romantically anytime there's any kind of chemistry, that it was kind of exciting to see that, like, oh, look, they're just really awesome buds, and he really did see something good in her and just kind of helped her out, and now they're like so close and it's legit, platonic. I thought that was cool, plus
Yeah,
the
that
rivalry,
was
but
cool.
as a family person, because I'm married and have kids and, I'm old. It's like the idea of him having a secret family somewhere was kind of cool because
It's
nobody
very
does
rare. I agree with that.
Yes, it's extremely rare. Nobody does that. These guys all go around, they either fall in love with each other or they fall in love with somebody else, have sex, and then they get killed. This is how it works, And so, like, for him to actually have a functioning family life that he has kept hidden in secret for their protection is honestly, like, that's kind of cool. I didn't mind it. I really didn't. But then everybody hated it. I was like, I'll shut up. Sorry. So.
Natasha has two hands. Holy crap.
Yeah, she says, like Natasha has two hands, she def has a poly thing with the Barton. The possibilities are endless.
Amber, you make a good point there too. That's fair, and that's a fair interpretation. So, So her whispering traitor at like his wife's womb has far more meaning now, you know.
I think my thing with Barton and Natasha was that they have like a really deep friendship, and there's a lot of backstory that would have been interesting. But like, I guess it's kind of also cool that they didn't like explicitly say, and then this happened, and they went here. You know, just like knowing that the two of them have history like that. Like that's what I thought. But I always thought she had chemistry with Rogers, but like.
She does have chemistry with Rogers. This problem, she has chemistry with a lot of people, you know, so that's fair. You know? So
speaking of Man of Steel.
Yeah, sorry. Back we go.
Yeah, sorry.
Back on track. I gotta go. All right, go ahead.
I didn't have anything. I'm just trying to read it.
You know, in Man of Steel, there is this one particular subject I like a lot about. Is that how Jor-El encourages Clark to embrace Earth as his home. Like when Jor-El explained Clark where he comes from, Kal-El's conclusion was, so I'm alone then. And Jor-El says, no, you're just as a child of Earth as you're of Krypton. You can embrace the best things from both worlds. And it was beautiful because this movie, it points at that the most important part about what makes family is not blood but a relationship between people. And I love this part about this movie a lot.
Oh gosh, you're so right, and I love how you put it, because just phrasing it the way you did, I mean, it's not like I should have realized it before, maybe in the back of my head I did, but I suddenly was like, oh my gosh, and then you're right, and then Zod shows up, one of his own kind, and is like, no, your loyalty is only to Krypton, no one else, you know, nobody here matters, not even the mother that you completely lost it and wailed on me for, you know, like, nobody here matters, only Krypton, ever, you know, and so, yeah, this is why I always loved the Child of Two Worlds idea that they pulled with this, because he's going to feel pull in both directions, and he's going to feel loyalty both ways, and I love that Jor-El is the polar opposite of Zod, going, no, it's cool, you were raised here, this is part of you now, you know, and that is something that people forget in an immigration story, that, you know, immigrants can often develop a great love for the country that they move to, you know,
not even like an immigrant story, but like not forgetting.
You know,
that Superman is an adoption story. Like that's so important. Like the fact that we don't forget that in this particular narrative is so important to a lot of people.
You know, it's very important.
And it's like it's like one of the most important things about the story. Like the very base of Superman is sort of like, you know, being orphaned and being found by the right people and being raised by people who aren't your biological parents, and what that means as a person, and that being so important to the narrative. It just feels like Snyder got just like everything in, which is just miraculous, given how many different takes there are.
Yes. Totally agree. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And I don't know, I have an ancestor way back who came over from Denmark with his brothers and sisters, and like even into his old age he didn't speak Danish, and it's not like he turned his back on his country, but he said, but I don't live there, I live here, you know, and so he had a great love for the farm he worked and the family that he raised here, and you know, just all of that kind of stuff that he thought was so important, because he came here and built it in this land, you know, and no, never ever should you turn your back on where you came from. But there is a point that people forget, you know, like they just want to all come in here and just turn us into what they were. No, they don't. They want to come and find, you know, a better life than where they were, you know, and that's going to include all sorts of different things. So I don't know. I'm just babbling, but it's a beautiful thing, and I love the message that it sends, and I love the idea that I lost it. I just love that stupid movie, guys. So
I think it's like a big, like, the fact that the contrast, I think, between Zod and Clark, and also just between Zod and Jor-El, because, like, Zod's whole mentality is, like, we can't share the Earth, you know? Yes. Like, there's not enough room for the two of us. And Clark is living proof that you can share the Earth with humans, you know? And that was, like, a thing, like, Zod was like, what, do you expect us to, like, adjust like you have? It's like, yeah.
Go through pain for them? How
Yeah,
dare
like,
you?
you know, like there's not enough room for the two of us. And Clark is like, I live here, I have loving parents, like,
Yeah.
it's all good. But
You know,
Zod
go
doesn't
through
see
some
it that
pain,
way,
but
you
then,
know?
look at this great thing. And so, like, a little bit of pain, save the inhabitants, the billions of people already here. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Yeah, I'd take a little pain if it meant sparing lives, I'm down with that. But okay, you're right. He was very, very strict about that. So,
Yep.
I just love that movie. Anyway, I will also say that, like, this is kind of a sensitive subject, but you're right. The idea of being raised by people who are not your biological parents is probably a closer subject for Zach, considering that some of his children are adopted, and they themselves know what that feels like, to have a loving family that you love, but to still feel like something, is different, that you're not, just like everybody else. And so I really think that he tapped into some personal issues and some things that he's seen firsthand, from his children, that to create this story about Clark, and it's part of why it has resonated with so many people. It's a beautiful thing, and it also, again, it's your family isn't just blood. I have 2 stepkids that are like mine. Like, I didn't give birth to them, but they are of my heart. They're mine. They are my children as much as my other children are. There's no difference in my mind. So on the rare occasion when somebody goes, oh, well, they're just half siblings, they get this weird stare of, what? Because that's not how I ever think of them. I love
absolutely.
them. They're mine, and so it's like there's sometimes blood doesn't define how much you can love someone.
Well, and I think we talk a lot about like filmmakers usually, once they become parents and once they reach a certain age, don't necessarily make art for their own edification. They start making art for their children, and I think that it's not a stretch to imagine that a lot of this story was a gift for his kids, for those experiences, and to try and say, like, there is a story out there that matters to you. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a large number of Superman fans have become adoptive parents, because
cool.
There's such a cool, there's such a cool good, it's a good representation, and I think that people don't really realize, especially from the perspective of adopted kids, sort of how many negative portrayals of adoption there are out there, and how that can be really, really, really rough for a kid who's trying to see themselves, and it's either a horror movie about adopting the wrong baby and the baby kills you, or
the parents are horrible adoptive parents. They adopted you just to make you miserable for your entire lives.
There are no good scenarios. There are no heroes out there for adopted kids, and I think that that's something that makes Superman really important. But I also think that it changes people's minds about how that works. It changes people's minds about how people love, and the fact that love is flexible, and the fact that it's not weirdly biological, and that the idea that you have to have a child from your own genes in order to love it is a fallacy.
You're right. That's hilarious.
And that idea is really that idea is consistently debunked. I've seen Superman portrayals that have handled it really poorly, and they always make me super mad. I burned a book, literally.
What did you do? So what was in it? What was in it?
It was Miracle Monday. Miracle Monday is fucking trash. Just to let everyone know. Not, sorry about the F word, but it is. It's trash. It's a trashy book. And I was super pissed about it the whole time. But those kind of portrayals are really, really antithetical to the really amazing, pure ideas at the center of this relationship with the Kents. And it's not even something that I would necessarily completely credit to Jerry and Joe and say it's part of the origin. It's something that was added along the way, and I think that that's even cooler, because I think somewhere along the way, someone said, like, well, where did he come from and who made this amazing person? And someone said adoptive parents. And I think that's really cool. Like, that's a really exciting thing for someone to, like, be like, oh, well, obviously, because it's not obvious to a lot of people. A lot of people are really, really weird, and they have a stigma in their head about adoption.
Oh yeah, no, you remember when when people were kids and that was the thing to tell your siblings to freak them right out was that they were adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, the reaction should be, so what if I was?
Yeah.
Like, what would it matter? So. Yeah.
And the Kens themselves are a good representation for a possibility of healthy family in a family where you physically can have kids because of biology or sickness.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also a very good thing about this movie, is that it shows a very healthy family through adoption. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and the idea that, like, and we've seen this touched on in other areas too, even though it might not have had as good of a result. Like, the idea that you find something that is tiny and small and fairly helpless, and feel nothing but the desire to care for it and make sure that it is safe and happy. And we saw this on Thor. I loved that scene when Odin picked up tiny Loki, and he was just a little baby, and it was like, oh my gosh, I can't just leave him here. Like, you just,
oh my
there's
God.
something in you that's like, I cannot possibly just leave this thing to die. It's mine now. I will take care of it. I love it. It's mine.
We were getting my nails
Ken did the
painted
same
for
thing,
my sister's wedding.
So.
We were getting my nails painted for my sister's wedding, and Thor was on the TV because apparently, like, this particular nail salon only watches superhero movies. Just have them playing 24/7. Yeah, and Thor was on the TV, and that scene where Loki confronts Odin started playing. And my sister looks up and she goes, like, why is he so upset? And while I was explaining it to her, I started crying a little. And it was like it was a huge mess. It was really silly. But like that scene was so, and that's the thing, it's so affecting. Like, it's so important. That they be able to, like, that we be able to look at that kind of stuff and be like, like, there's something beautiful about that. I mean, Loki's a really flawed representation for adopted kids because, like, literally everything that I can imagine that's bad in terms of an adoptive story is in.
That's what I was saying, like, bad. Honestly, part of it is, like, you look at the Kents, and they weren't entirely truthful right at the front with in Man of Steel with Clark about what he is, and stuff like that. But at the same time, they raised him to be accepted and loved no matter what. Even if, he has amazing hearing, or sees everything and freaks out in the closet, or, like, anything. It doesn't matter. We still love you, son. There's nothing wrong with you. And Loki got raised, you're my son and I love you. Man, I'm sure glad you're not one of those nasty blue things. Those things are awful. And so when he discovers that's what he is, then, like, how can you not have that self-hatred emanate because you've been raised your whole life to think that those are bad? And so that's, like, how you don't do it, guys. You can't adopt a child and then raise them that what they are or where they came from is inferior and thus bad. Please don't do that, because you will create this horrible cycle of self-hatred their whole lives, and they don't deserve that. Nobody deserves that. So, in a lot of ways, it's like, you tried, Odin, you really did, but you messed up hardcore along the way.
That is kind of like a theme of the movies, though, that Odin is not exactly doing this.
How hard did Odin try? I'm just wondering. I don't know. I'm
sure
skeptical
Thor was
about
the golden child, but at the same time, the first Thor. See, this is where we got to do the podcast. We talked about this. The first Thor, they made it clear that he loved Loki as his son. After that, I was like, did you ever really love him? Because his character changed so night and day that it was like, Loki was just a redheaded stepchild that he despised with everything in him, and it was like, okay, so where's the middle ground? Family's
Ragnarok has
it's
a moment for that,
simple.
though. It's the only good thing that happens in Ragnarok.
Yeah, okay.
Are talking about
but so I agree that there's a lot of nuances that I feel are missed sometimes, where they'll go over the top one way and not the other, and so I don't know. The Kents are a beautiful example, and even Martha is open about the fact that it was hard watching you grow up because you struggled. It hurt to breathe. I worried about you all the time, you know, and even Clark comes out with, oh, well, you were worried the truth would come out. No, that's not why I was worried, dude. I was worried that you weren't going to make it because you were laying in your crib and couldn't breathe well, like, oh, okay. It just is a different way of coming at it. And the Kents are, the poster children for awesome adoptive parents. So that's all I have to say.
That's one thing, like the whole concept of, the topic of adoption in itself. And this just came out recently. I didn't even know this, and I don't know why it took me so long to realize this, but Zach named the production after Autumn.
Yeah.
Because the production name for Man of Steel was Autumn Frost, and at the time it was stylized like the Action Comics logo. So like, okay, cool. Because every big major blockbuster film has some sort of production name, so people don't know immediately, oh, they're filming the next Superman movies.
Yeah.
But I just seen that the other day. I was like, oh my god, and I posted it in the group chat, and I'm just like, now I'm just gonna go over and cry because I think I can't handle this right now.
I knew the codename was Autumn Frost years ago, but I didn't put it together with his daughter's name until he went that, and I was like, oh, you just heard me, Zach. You just heard me a lot. I need to go away now. So, yeah, I thought that was beautiful. And I think that lends some meaning to the idea that this was a gift to his children, that, it doesn't matter where you came from. You're still loved, and you can be anything you want to be, So, maybe I'm reading too much into that, but knowing Zach, he'll be like, no, that's what I meant. So...
Don't ever doubt that, because I get in trouble every single time. I have shame.
Stop reading too deep. Oh, it is that deep. See, I'm always like,
it is that deep.
Didn't read deep enough.
It's like basically like looking at like that whole having people raise you. And I know I'm kind of like late to this part of the topic, but analyzing Man of Steel in that way, and I feel like we brought this up in the commentary, and that yes, the Kents aren't Clark's biological family, but you never doubt their love for him for a single moment. Because, their love for him is just so strong, and especially for me coming from divorced parents. Well, it's not exactly the same as being adopted. I have
fractured homes are a big deal.
Two sets of parents. I have two dads and I have two moms, and even now, being married, I now have my father-in-law and my mother-in-law who've brought me into their family, and just having that, it's kind of hard for me to put into words. I'm actually getting pretty emotional thinking about it. But just looking at Man of Steel in that way, and that love is more. You're right, Katie and Danielle, but love is more than just blood. Love is you choosing to give your all and to be there for the people in your life. And I think that's one of the most powerful messages that Man of Steel was able to convey, because especially if you look at every main character, you get them a sense of they're all willing to do whatever they can to either protect each other or protect the world, and you never doubt their loyalty. Even Zod and Feyor, they were doing what they thought was necessary to protect Krypton, and while flawed, and they never doubted for a second their mission. It's not until the mission is completely gone that they realize, well, now I have nothing to live for, so now my only mission is to end you and your people, or the people you've chosen to call your own. But for each character, there's just that. It's just. I'm trying not to repeat it myself, because I feel like I said the same thing many times. But just the characters in this movie feel so real in that way, because their drives and who they are as people just feel so real because of that, the power of love and just. I'm sorry. I'm just getting really emotional. But you guys know what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
I'm starting to ramble.
I did that too. So you get kind of really invested. And the next thing you know, you're like, "Wow, I've been talking for 10 minutes and I don't think I said anything." So yeah, it's okay. I get
you. I think Clark is really fortunate because when you think about it, if he had ended up in a worse situation, if he had ended up with parents, first of all, if he had ended up with people who didn't love him or weren't as understanding, he might have gone with Zod,
Yep.
Because he wouldn't have had the connection to humanity. He wouldn't have loved humanity. He would have been I'm an outsider. These people and I have nothing in common. They'll never understand me. The only people who can possibly empathize with me, the only people who will ever accept me are Kryptonians, so I need to like destroy humanity
Yeah.
in order to belong.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And honestly, I think his connection with Lois was a lot of it, but it was so new in Man of Steel that I can't guarantee that he wouldn't have gone that direction. You're right. If it hadn't been for his parents and his mother and, you know, all the experience that he had with them throughout his years.
Well, and I think that it's a huge part of who Superman is, that ability to, like, know what empathy feels like and know that empathy is an important value, and being able to empathize with strangers in the same way that, you know, his parents empathized with a tiny baby they found by the roadside. Like, having an understanding for that is really, I mean, like, it's really baseline to what makes him heroic and what makes him, you know, choose Superman every single day. And, like, and then I mean, think that, you know, there's a line between, like, sort of, like, the way that the Kents sort of decided who Clark was going to be, and the way that Lois sort of helped Clark understand who Superman was going to be. And those are two different things. But they're both really important, and I think that the Kent's contribution was making this, you know, this really sensitive, really, really in touch with his emotions, really empathetic man. And I think that, you know, nothing else could happen until after that happened. None of the other events would have fallen into place had they not been the people who raised him.
Agreed. I love these guys.
It just, I just don't get, like, when people say that, like, oh, that these films are just bland, boring, and, like, emo and blah, blah, blah. Like, I just, like, it's one thing to, okay, if you don't like a movie, but that's fine. But the most frustrating thing for me is when people pretend that these movies mean nothing. Like, obviously there are hundreds, if not thousands of fans whose these films have truly impacted their lives in positive ways. Like look at all of us here. Like, we all came together because of these films. And like, there's so many people who are affected in even more positive ways. Like, people who, like, these movies help them beat their depression, or, like, help them, like, come to terms with who they are, and it's just, these films mean so much more than what some people give them credit for. Like, again, you'll have to love these movies, but at least acknowledge that they can make positive impacts in people's lives. Like, me, I've been getting emotional every time I talk about the movie for this entire damn podcast. So,
I mean, I think it's unusual that people say that these movies don't have impact, because they're always talking about how militant the DCEU fandom is and how we're like cultists, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, so if we're all of that, how can you say that these movies don't have impact on people? Like, how can you say that these movies don't affect people's lives? Like, if we're
there's an impact here. Yeah, you have a good point.
You know, we must be following something.
Yeah. In the end, all I can say is that typically when I find myself describing, or when I see other people describing something, anything really, as, you know, nothing, or as just straight up boring, or, you know, there was nothing, it in the end, it just means to me that I wasn't the right person to invest with this, or I'm going out of my way to diminish it because I don't care about looking deeper for anything more, you know? And that's totally cool, you know, but at the same time, like, yeah, when people come out with stuff like that, it's like, it's easy to just roll my eyes and keep scrolling, or just block that person, because in the end, they aren't putting any effort at all into seeing anything deeper, and they just want to write it off, you know? And it's like, that's cool, that's totally you, but go over there and do you, because I don't need to hear it. And so,
yeah. I think when people do make that point of how, you know, with Man of Steel and BVS, how they always say that, oh, these movies have there's no joy in any of them, there's no happiness in any of them. And I think that's kind of it's not, like Man of Steel and BVS don't present this sort of cookie cutter form of happiness. It's like finding the good in the worst situations, and that's what I feel Man of Steel and BVS did, because even Bruce Wayne himself said it at the end, where it's like, men are still good,
we fight, we kill, we do all this, but we rebuild, we can do better. And, that's a very interesting message that I feel no one pays attention to simply because it's coming from, a DC movie.
Yeah. Which is too bad because DC movies have provided some of the deepest thoughts I've been enjoying over the last several years,
Like, again,
Well, it happened to me again on Twitter today. I got in an argument with someone about how much Amy Adams was in the merchandise, which is like a mathematical argument, and I probably shouldn't have engaged it at all because you just need the knowledge, like you just need the facts to know that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
But, like, you got to a certain point where it was just like, well, it's just comic books. And I was like, why do people always make that argument? Like, why are you here then?
Yeah.
Why are you having this conversation?
Why are you arguing about just comic books?
Why talk about them? Why consume them? Why do anything with comic books if they don't matter? Let's stop pretending that things don't matter. And he was like, well, it's not like Faulkner. And I was like, why not? Why? On what level is it not like Faulkner? In what level does it deserve less of your respect and attention? I mean, like, from someone who thinks that a lot of that stuff is fairly overrated, and, having studied it for 7 years, I feel like I can say that. But like, if you're not interested, if you're not engaging with something, like the idea that it doesn't have worth, and the idea that you can't engage it on deeper levels, and that you can't take it really seriously, is just so flawed and such a waste of your time. Like, just stop, just give up, like, just ignore something if it doesn't interest you. It's not that hard. And I don't understand why people can't get on board with that mentality. Can't just say like, well, I don't see anything in this. End of conversation. Cool, yeah, awesome. We're not wasting a lot of each other's time, because I do.
I don't know, it's like people are bored or something and they kind of want something to do. Like, they just like, oh, I don't have anything to do. Let me look at things that I don't care about or find any enjoyment in. Which is strange, but I don't know.
Some people feel the need to go out and womp on other things to make them feel better, and that is weird, but it is true. So, I tend to not engage with those people. All right, I have to go, I gotta say. It's been like 3 hours. So.
Well, I think on that note, I think it's probably a good time for all of us to go anyway. I mean, I'm a little, talked out.
We're a little late. I know, we actually had a moment of silence in this one. I think we're running out of stuff to say, so
I know.
we should better quit now. Holy crap. Okay, I am gonna say, though, just in my defense, like, we were talking about Zack Snyder and the release the Snyder Cut people and stuff like that. I am one of those to the extent that if you ever go to my Twitter feed, like 90% of it will be that. I freely admit it. I want it, and I would like WB to feel the pressure. However, never will you ever find me moseying into Zach's posts on Vero or anywhere else and going, please release the Snyder Cut, because in the end, that's very, very lame, and please don't do that. But yeah,
direct the pressure.
It's all over my Twitter feed.
There's nothing wrong with constantly talking about releasing the Snyder Cut. As long as you don't put it somewhere where Zach will see it, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Because he's not on Twitter, except for that one tweet he made, and then we all went crazy. But like,
well, people need to put it in the right direction too, because like I saw it in David Ayer's feed too, in a totally it was a personal post, and someone had responded with release the Snyder Cut, and I was like, leave him alone. Yes. That's creepy. Oh, that's upsetting. That's weird. That's bad behavior.
Putting it into cast members or other people involved in the DCEU and stuff like that—that's lame, you guys. And you're just shotgunning it in the wrong direction. WB needs to be the largest recipient, because they're the ones that may actually pay attention and do something. David Ayer can't do anything for you. Leave the man alone.
With the merger thing, they're merging with.
Oh yeah, AT&T has merged with Time Warner. Yeah, so basically, so that's
What is with the I don't like all of these giant merger things happening. It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, because everything's basically becoming a monopoly, and it's getting out of hand. But we'll save that for next time, since Katie has to go, and we're all gonna talk about. But so guys, I want to say thank you to everyone here. Thank you guys for joining me. I know it's been a long time since we recorded. I promise there'll be more content in the future. We are starting the Bitter Geeks podcast soon, so if you guys aren't following us on Twitter, please do so at DC Films Podcast. That's where all of our updates will be for the new podcast and this current podcast when we're reporting and things like that. And also, but actually, before we go, I feel bad because there's one person who had a quick question for us. Katie, if you have to go, you have to go. That's fine.
I'll stay for that. Questions? What?
I always do this, and I feel so bad. I'm terrible at this, guys. Okay.
Just post it and mention them and say, just go to the last 5 minutes of the episode. You'll hear your question.
Oh no, here, but I mean, if you guys have to go, you guys can go. But I'll go ahead and answer
I can stay. I'll stay. I can stay. I want to know what it is.
Okay.
Tell us the question.
Okay, so this is from Melissa Wants to Be a Journalist at Mermaid Sailor on Twitter, and her question was, what were your thoughts on the initial trailers and marketing for Man of Steel? Did they change after seeing the movie?
Wow, that's an excellent question.
I saw the movie, the trailers promoted to me, like, literally. The trailers never lied to me when it came to Man of Steel, unlike Justice League.
Yeah.
And the very first two teaser trailers with Jor-El and Jonathan Ken monologues, they caught me with how much attention these teasers pay to the world that this movie is going to be in. It doesn't show Superman until the last very few seconds. It establishes this teaser. It tries to establish the world where the story is going to be, and it shows, like these simple things, like a house on the side of a river, like someone's socks are like they're how. Well, you get the idea. It tries to portray the realistic world that's going to be happening in, and the monologue. The monologue was beautiful.
Yes.
Both fathers were saying
the Jor-El and Jonathan trilogy. I completely agree.
Yes.
For myself, I remember the Comic-Con trailer that was the very first teaser trailer, the one we're talking about. It was just, both perspectives were so beautiful, and I love the Lord of the Rings score in the background. It just fits so well.
Yeah.
I love it so much. But my favorite trailer, and I've said this several times, that was one of the last trailers. I believe it came out in like April of 2013. That used the what are you trying to do? We're not saving the world.
Yes.
That was hands down one of my favorite trailers of all time. It's so incredibly edited, and the music, and just the way it ends. I loved it so much. The marketing for Man of Steel, I loved it.
That's fine.
Like, it was just the movie lived up to everything and more. I loved it so much. I could talk about the trailers and stuff all day. I watch a trailer from time to time just because it's just that good of a trailer.
Yes, same here.
But yeah, so for me, I love the bit of marketing.
Yep, totally.
I think my initial thoughts on the trailers was because this was during a time where I wasn't really the biggest fan of Superman, and I know that's a shocker considering me, but I think my favorite trailer of Man of Steel is actually the teaser, the very first teaser we saw of Superman, where it's I don't know, I think it was Jor-El who was monologuing, and it was of Clark as a kid. And you see that scene where he's like running around with the cape on his back, and it just felt so, I don't know, it felt so interesting to see Superman's origins and realize, oh, this is what he was also like as a kid. And then, of course, there's that scene where you see him flying up in the air, like for the very first time, you hear him break the sound barrier the first time, like, and then you see his emblem show up on the big screen, because I saw that teaser when I went to the movies to see The Dark Knight Rises. It is a whole other feeling when you see it in like a theater, and you see that big S emblem show up on the screen. It was amazing. That was probably one of the things that really made me like, okay, I gotta see this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I remember seeing that one too, and that was A Dark Knight Rises, and I'm ashamed to admit that I was like, I'll give it a shot, But my favorite is yours, Nick. That one with the actual music from it and everything. All the editing. It's so exciting. It's so, oh my gosh, like I have to see this. I have to see this right now, and it didn't disappoint when I got there. Sorry, Danielle, go.
Honestly, it didn't matter to me very much at the time. So I don't have a very good recall of my experience of the trailers really early. I remember hearing Zack Snyder speak and being horrified. I remember being terrified and being like, this is not the man, this is not it, this can't be the guy.
How can you not trust your God?
I was very blasphemous at this time in my life.
He gets nervous when he's speaking, and he's far better.
He's terrible at articulating his vision, and
he's a lovely man, but he's way better at just doing visuals. He could do that all day long.
He sounds like a dude, bro. He sounds like a surfer guy.
He looks like
and I was like, and I immediately just sort of went, not this guy, not this guy. It can't be this guy. This is a terrible idea. Oh my god, this is gonna be a really shitty movie. Oh god. And I had that like sort of like panic reflex, and mostly it mattered because like I didn't want my girlfriend to see a terrible Superman movie because that mattered to her at the time. I feel like it matters much less to her now that I've stolen her entire identity, but that's a totally different thing. But now, but I do remember one thing. Was there a trailer with with that shot with the butterfly and the rope swing?
Yeah,
that was the first teaser.
Yeah. That's the one that got me. That was the one where I was like, maybe. Like, that is something interesting and new and beautiful and not really like, cliche. It was something that I was like, this guy might bring something new to the table. He might bring something that I haven't seen before, and that's really exciting because, I mean, like, I was high on Thor at the time. Like, mostly I was just sort of like, anything like Thor. Thor was so good. And then I watched Man of Steel, and I was like, Thor, who is this guy? But I do remember the one when I saw that the rope swing and the butterfly. I was really, really, really taken with that imagery. Was just so. It is Superman. It's so very Superman, but in the way that you would only think so if you were really intimate with Superman. Like, it was just to the core of something just beautiful and soft at the center of the character, and it's still one of my favorite shots. I still see it, and it's very Man of Steel to me. It's like one of the most important things that happens in the whole movie. It's hard to talk about because it's like a moment. But that moment was like really, really, really impactful for me, and I was sort of like, maybe. But like, to be totally honest, I spent the entire lead up to the movie totally horrified and scared out of my mind, because I heard Zach speak. and I made a lot of judgments right away. So like, that's half the reason that I'm so interested in the people who are so angry with Zach, because I'm like, I feel like you're getting, like, I feel like I can kind of understand where you're coming from, but like, you've just blazed ahead into wrongness instead of reevaluating that knee-jerk response. You've just been like, absolutely, I thought this was the first thought I thought, so that's the thought. And it's like, no, honey, like think about it for a minute and really think, like, are you misjudging this person? Are you making snap judgments based on the way that he speaks, the way that he sounds, the way that he comes across when he's talking about things? Because like with Zach, everything's like, yeah, super awesome, like that would be so rad, and like that's not how you necessarily want people to talk about Superman. But that's just his dialect, and I was judging him based on his dialect, and I think a lot of people do judge him based on his dialect.
It's just a perfect way. It perfectly sums up prejudice in so many different ways. You make that knee-jerk judgment, and do we take the time later to self-evaluate and go, okay, you know what? I might have jumped the gun here. I might be wrong. There's more to be considered than just my knee-jerk reaction. Or are we so determined to be correct that we will just push forward with that, even if we're being shown we're wrong, like right in our face? And so you're right. That's a really nice way to sum it up.
I kind of like, I used to think that Zach was a dude bro too, but like I had seen his work and I knew how good it was, so I just thought like, oh, he's not like a bad dude bro. He's just a dude bro who likes visuals, Because I saw Legend of the Guardians Owls of Kahul, and I was like, this movie is amazing. I saw Sucker Punch, and I was like, that was amazing. I chalked it up to the writer, and I'm like, this Zack Snyder guy knows how to do visuals. Obviously, the reason the movie's so good is because of the writer, right? And 300, I thought the visuals were good. Obviously, that the point of that movie is not exactly to make a poetic story or anything. So I wasn't scared of Man of Steel. I wasn't like, oh, this movie's going to be the plot is going to be awful because Zack Snyder's behind it. I was just like, well, Zack Snyder has done movies that I really enjoyed, and when he's working with a good writer, like, it turns out really great because the plot is good, characters are good, visuals are good, there's, everything is going to be good if he's working with good people. And I didn't know that he was, like, a genius yet, Obviously, the people he's working with are amazing, but I didn't know he was a genius. And so I had never seen any interviews with him. I honestly did not know what he looked like. All I knew was the name Zack Snyder, dude, bro, director kind of thing. And so, I thought he was talented, but I didn't really, know who he was. And so, after when Batman v Superman was being promoted, that's when I actually saw his face, and I didn't actually hear him talk about things until during my DCEU fandom phase when I was growing into this DCEU identity I have, in not after August, maybe November, after I had seen Suicide Squad, and I was watching interviews with actors and stuff. And so, after having experienced that Zack Snyder is a genius, right? When I see him talk, it just makes me feel like he's more charming, because it's like, oh, he's a genius, but he talks so, colloquially. I never was like, oh no, listen to him talking, he doesn't know what he's doing. I'm like, oh, he's a genius. Now I'm gonna watch the interviews. Oh my gosh, he talks like a normal person. You would never think that he is the smartest guy around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What everybody has said, and it still holds true in certain interviews, Batman v Superman less, because he was already having a hard time. But Man of Steel and stuff like that, when he gets really excited about things, his enthusiasm carries over, even when his words are just barely this kind of mishmash of what? He's so cute, but he gets so excited. Exactly, he makes sound, and he's like, and you're like, okay, I'm not quite sure what you're saying, but your enthusiasm has me, man. And so, and I think that's cute because he's very, very excited about this stuff, and yet he's he knows words, he can do words, but they're not his medium. They're just not his true medium, His true medium is visuals. He can do that all day long and talk to you, but words are hard,
I think there's a big difference between being eloquent on the page and being eloquent out loud.
Yeah. Yes,
and I think that Zach definitely lives in that gap between being eloquent on the page. He can write very, we've read things that he's written, they're beautiful.
Yes.
He can write very eloquently about his feelings, about his vision, about everything. And then, I think that there's some social anxiety probably, and there's some, there's some general, edginess about the press, which is not undeserved, that gets in the way of him being able to clearly articulate his vision. And I just think it's cute now. I just think it's kind of a really cool quirk of the person. It's just that it scared the living crap out of me in the first place. I was like, no.
You go, what? So this is why it's always good to self-evaluate and come back later.
Well,
okay.
and
I remember.
And
how do I feel now?
Art isn't necessarily your personality. That's a thing too. Art isn't necessarily who you are as a person. And even if Zach was the giantest dude bro in the world, it's not necessarily true that would come through in his work, especially since a lot of what he does is hire really amazing writers and have really amazing conversations with them. It's still Chris Terrio's work. It's still David Goyer's work. It's still people who can translate that vision into something. And that changes, throughout the process.
Yep. I do think he's good at recognizing talent and, and going, ooh, want to work with that person.
And we forget that's what a director's for.
Exactly.
We forget that's his most important job. His most
Yep.
important job is to look at Ray Fisher and be like, that's Cyborg. And have everyone else be like, not really. And him be like, yeah, no. This guy who's currently playing Muhammad Ali on Broadway is Cyborg. And everyone to look at him and be like, Zach, you're crazy. And then for him to pull the most amazing performance out of this kid that obviously, you know, he pulled that performance out of him, and to make, you know, Ray Fisher at last.
Yep.
That's his magic.
No, it is his magic. And I will say, can I just say, like, I thought it was adorable yesterday how the first picture of Superman before Man of Steel came out when he's against the safe and it's all dented and there's sparks everywhere and stuff like that was posted because people were celebrating. And Clay came on and was like, oh, I was really nervous about doing this shot. It was like one of the first shots I did. I'm so glad Zach was there supporting me and giving me encouragement. It was like, dude, you know, this is what I see, is that he's like, you know, don't worry, we got this. And he just kind of lifts up other people, too, and helps them along. And, you know, it's no wonder that he's invited a lot of loyalty through that, because I think it's generally a fairly positive person to get around on, you know, and that's just a really wonderful thing to do, to lift up others around you and to not just always be about you. So
it's like how Henry Cavill and Amy Adams described him in Justice League bonus footage. Behind the scenes footage in the bonus section, they explain that his vision is so precise that when Zack Snyder is in the room with green screens, he doesn't see green screens, he sees the whole picture right away.
Oh, that's cool. That is cool, and I can believe that. And Deborah talked about that too, where even certain cameras, they'd be like, you don't have to go past this point. We know that he doesn't, you know, nothing past this point is going to matter. He doesn't want anything in that shot. He wants this shot up to here and over there, you know. Oh, okay. You know, like, it's that specific. And I'm like, wow. I'd be like, do everything, do all of it, and I'll sort it out later. You know, I'll figure it out. I'll have like a mountain of extra crap and be like, I don't know, you know. But like, he has this very specific vision in mind, and he knows exactly how he wants it. That's really cool. That's not a talent I have.
Which is why I think that him picking up Henry Cavill to play Superman, it's just one person out of 7 billion humans on the planet. Like, he chose so correctly. Wow. I can't imagine anybody else but Henry Cavill to play his version of Superman.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. He is Superman to me.
Even, like, it was weird for me, because, like, even, like, when I saw Man of Steel, I was like, it wasn't, like, I didn't think that it was the perfect performance, but I was like, I don't think anybody else should play this character, though. Like, that guy is this character. Like, that's just the facts. Like, I was just like, yep, like, that's who it's gonna be, you know, that's just correct.
Yeah, it fit perfectly. He was a perfect fit.
And can I say that, like, in all the images that Zach has shown of, like, Zach in, like, the test, like, suit and all that stuff, Henry pulls off every single fucking suit so well.
Right?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, I think Zach has a crush on Henry, I'll be honest. Like, I think, I don't know.
I think I have a crush on Henry, and I definitely project that onto a lot of these photos. But, you know, I saw every single shot with the different suits, and it was sort of like, yeah, we could have gone with that. That would have been fine. I don't see anything wrong with that. That was great too. Hey, this one's a little bit too sexy, but that's not a problem for me.
But I'll take it.
Or even like the I don't know if you guys have seen it, but like that original picture of Henry Cavill and Superman Flyby from like the original thing he was in. Even then, even though you only see like the upper portion of the suit,
he made that horrific suit look so good.
Yes, and that is what I remember most is Zach talking about casting Henry, and it was that moment because they had all the contenders try on that suit, and there must have been, you know, more than just Henry. And his words, I remember reading this in the magazine. Henry came out dressed in that suit, and he just looked like $1,000,000. And it was like, I mean, you know, even he acknowledged in the interview, it's like, you know, a glorified Halloween costume. It's spandex, you know, it's like there's nothing major to it. But Henry came out, and boom, there he was, and he looked amazing, and people stopped and looked, you know, and they're all like, holy crap, it felt like Superman had arrived. And of course, you know, how do you not go, yep, that's my guy.
I just wonder how like the whole like process was for the person who was designing and fitting these suits for Henry, and how they felt about everything they had to try on. Because imagine as much like Danielle is like, oh my god, he looks perfect in this. Oh my god, he looks perfect in this. Oh no.
I wouldn't want to make the decisions, but I'd want to be the costumer because I'd be like, it's fine. We're short on time. Just cut some armholes in that plastic bag. He'll carry it off. You know, like
Just
he'll
spray
make it
paint an
look
S
good.
on
He
there.
makes everything look good.
All right. I know so we're running really over for you, Katie, and I apologize. But thank you, Melissa, for your question. On that note, thank you guys again for joining me today. I know it's been a while. It was a ton of fun, especially towards the end there. But seriously, thank you guys again. And I missed talking to you guys. You guys have no idea. But definitely doing this more often, especially with the Bitter Geeks podcast coming up. Thank you again, Amber. I know you couldn't really be here for the entire thing. You couldn't talk the entire thing, but thank you so much for everything you said. Hopefully we'll get you on more later. Thank you guys again. Seriously, I love all you guys. You guys are awesome.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for having us.
Awesome.
All right, and thank you guys again for listening. I know I apologize again for this coming so late after the last podcast, but I've been getting busy with life and married life and my wedding and honeymoon and everything. But again, keep an eye out on our Twitter for everything going on with our current podcast and the Bitter Geeks podcast. I know I've said this several times, but seriously, follow us on Twitter because that's where everything's going to be announced. Because it's hard to notify you guys of everything going on if you guys aren't following us there. But seriously, thank you guys again for listening. Having you guys listen to us every episode, it really means the world to us. Share the podcast, let people know about it because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys. So seriously, thank you guys again. And on that note, have a good one, you guys as well. Bye.